got to have that on, don't I? Yeah, sorry. Good morning, councillors. Good morning to the media. Good morning to staff. And good morning to the public of Ashburton. Today we are meeting to make decisions on the draft Ashburton Domain Development Plan, and we have in front of us a summary of feedback. We have all read all submissions, and we have revitalised ourselves with looking at the plan, and we are ready to be in decision mode. So I'm going to call on the Mayor to just spend 30 seconds explaining what happened at the first meeting about the domain project, and then I'm going to go to Tony Durham, and then we'll get straight into some of the chunky issues that might make it easier to put the small issues around the outside of. So with that, I'll call on Mayor Neil Brown. He might like to tell us when the first meeting of council or workshop of this domain project started.
I see found the minutes, and Bert supplied the minutes of that meeting on, was it June 2019 is when it first kicked off, and the councillors were there. There were 3 councillors not there. I was one, Councillor Price and Councillor Russell Ellis was not there either, so the other councillors were all there, and that's where it started. And just reading the minutes of that, some were agreement of the plan moving forward and some were not. So yeah, it's a good recap of how we got to the stage we're at today. So the process was working, it was working well, and we're here today at the other end of it. So
thank you. Tony Durham, Tony, can I please receive some suggestions or advice from you on how we handle this document, seeing that you're actually in the profession of advising on deliberations and plans, etc., etc.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, sure thing. So what you have in front of you is the summary of all the feedback that we've received to the draft Ashburton Domain Development Plan. Included in that summary is also the feedback that we received from school children last year in May, called through the Ashburton Youth Forum. So schools did a project on what they thought the future of the Ashburton Domain could be like. The way in which we've sliced up the feedback that we've received is that we've put it by topic or key issue that has come out of the Domain Development Plan. And our thinking in doing that is that that's to make your job a bit easier. So you simply work through this document, you take note of the staff comment, and you give direction with regard to the key concepts, the issues, as to whether you'd like to see them included in the final plan or not. With this not being a formal decision-making day, what you do is you give us direction as staff. We go away and create the final plan and bring it back to you through the the Community Services Committee, and then for final adoption through Council. But you've got a team of experts sitting at the front of the room with your landscape architect and with Bert and with Paul, and so you've got to call on them for expertise and for questions of clarification as we're working through the day. Have I covered enough, Councillor McKay?
Thank you. I intend to keep it as informal as possible, but when things get tight and sticky, I'll get very formal so we can actually make a decision. That's okay with you all. So I actually had the major decision up as the bowling club, but I see, Tony, on page 15, you've got the Central Hub project up first. I'm wondering, because they're actually connected, if somehow we could have a say about both those first. So who's going to be first up? Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question I would ask, having had nothing to do with this project up till now, is why do we need a central hub?
The landscape architect is your name, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Paul Roper G from Canopy Landscape Architects.
floor's yours, Paul, to explain that.
Yeah,
In your opinion.
Yep. So I guess to start, we're obviously been tasked to do a 30-year plan, so thinking in the long term, which is an opportunity to analyse what's working well and what's not working so well at the domain. It's also a chance to potentially propose some big changes or challenge some challenges. Look at the big picture. So in terms of a central hub, I think, in my opinion, the domain lacks an obvious sort of focal point or an arrival point. So the intent of the hub would be to provide a space that locals and visitors can arrive at. It provides a starting point from which you then explore the domain. It has information to guide people around the domain, space for people to meet, and potentially as part of that, a coffee or cafe offering could be part of that. So yeah, it's a meeting point and a starting point at the domain. And the intent being a hub, or the central hub, is that it is located in proximity to some of the key features that are there now, and also some of the new projects that have been proposed as part of the domain development plan. So it needs to be located in a central location adjacent to the different precincts, so the sporting facilities, the garden area, and obviously things like playgrounds, some of those key attractors that people want to come to the domain to see.
Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to say, look, travelling around the world to different gardens in different countries, you see these glorious buildings sitting in the middle of parks, locked up, and the only part of them being used is toilets. And why do we want to go there? You know, to me, people are the hub. People activities in our domain is the hub, the sports. And if we do decide to put in a building there for afternoon teas, whatever, it has to be over by the playground, by the swimming pool where the tourist bus stops. There's no point in having it in the middle of a garden where that's the last point where people go to. You need to hit them straight at the entranceway. And you look at Butchart Gardens, and a few of them, they all have their hubs on the side of gardens, nothing in the middle of them like that. It's usually a beautiful garden or some some feature in the middle, not a building these days.
Okay. Before I go to Councillor McMillan, I'm wondering, could we please have the map up on the wall? Because that might just help us a wee bit in locating people's suggestions or questions. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. And there was quite a few suggestions yesterday of the hub being relocated or situated on the side of the playground, which I agree with, because I think crossing the road with children can be tricky. Is there any way that if you put the new road in from Walnut Avenue and it comes around through the garden, you could have an area that is called the hub, but it's not actually a building. So there were other suggestions about, the coffee carts and the ice cream vans and all that sort of, so having an area there that you called the hub, which was where those people could park and it was kind of a central, so where the toilet, kind of where the burnt out toilets are now.
So, hang on, I'm just waiting for the map. Is that the one?
It's page 20.
Councillor McMillan, would you like to just quickly show us what? Please, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies for lateness, but we need a second bridge. To be honest, I like this plan the way it is. It's a 30-year vision. It doesn't happen overnight. A central point has to be in a central place, not next to the toilet where the tourists are coming. It has to be in the middle of the domain. I don't see it as a cafe. I see it as a meeting point, a complete different thing. I don't even see a coffee shop sitting there. There might be a coffee car sitting there. But to me, it's a central point where you can go, where you can start off from. If you look how the domain is developed over the last 125 years, you can see it's really almost a hub of all the different places. You know, the sport part is one side, you've got the gardens on the other side, you've got the oval, and you've got the office as well. To me, for a 30-year plan, I think they did a darn good job. It's not something that happens over the next couple of years. I don't see anyone has to go away for the next 10 years, to be quite honest, but it's a 30-year vision. If we don't have a 30-year vision, we shouldn't be sitting here. Thank you.
Councillor Rawlinson.
I will turn the slide off.
Thank you, and I basically agree with what has been said before, that the people are the hub, and the hubs are where people go. You've got hubs on Saturdays on sports fields, if you want to look at it that way. So, but I agree with Councillor McMillan in the situation where the new road will come in. If we have it on that side, we've got children's play area, and you're not going to have children crossing that busy road pathway in there for the parking. And I also think that rather than having a shop, which then has to be staffed on weekends and Sundays when the people are there, that perhaps we should look at the mobile food trucks. And also I don't believe we should be competing directly with the shops that we have in our town, who are fighting for survival too, as far as putting an on-site coffee shop. So that's just my opinion.
Councillor Cameron. Oh, Mayor Brown, sorry.
Thanks, Angus. Agree with a lot what's been said, and no more buildings on the domain at this stage. I think we heard from Smithers about that. Car parks are short. People had ideas on how to sort that, which related around the aviary gone. The aviaries are probably a thing of the past. Unless you're going to do it properly, don't do it at all, is what we heard. And I agree with that. The bowling green, we had a lot of submissions on that, and I think it stays exactly where it is. Yep. The and over time, we would look at relocating the parks department that don't need to be in the domain. So some would stay there, but a lot would move over time. And the hub, and I don't think the hub's a building. I think the hub might be a space for those mobile shops to come in and deliver whatever that needs to be delivered, what activities being done on the domain at that time. That people come to the domain to use the green space for physical activity, not a coffee shop. There's plenty of coffee shops in town. If they want a coffee, they can bring their thermos, or they can buy one in town and bring it up. A lot of people we heard, some people we heard yesterday, even bring their lunch and go to the domain. They've made it home and have it there, or they've purchased it somewhere and have it there. That's what a domain is. Nice seats, toilet, green spaces. And I'm just thinking about the road location on that map. It looks as though it cuts across a field. Is that just that map's different than the one I looked at before? That it might just be a location on the map now. I think it doesn't need to cut across the field. If it could perhaps stick closer to those trees that are there, so you're not using up good space for physical activity, sports activity, with a road. So perhaps the road needs a wee look at exactly where it could go, and I'm assuming it's just an indication at the moment on where it would go. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given it's a very long-term plan, like over 30 years, I think we need to ensure we maintain flexibility within the plan for as long as possible to allow us to adapt the plan as we go ahead. So hence I agree with the Mayor's thing on we don't need any extra buildings and we don't need any extra paths. I think a path, as long as there's flexibility within that path to adapt to that time in 20 years or within the plan, we can put a path in. I think so. We need to make sure the bones are fine for future-proofing the domain. With regards to the coffee carts, who knows? Like, we won't be around in 35 years or whatever. So who knows if there's even coffee carts then? So I think that's unnecessary to comment on that. In coffee, you know, we don't know what the heck we're doing in 30 years. So I think if we maintain the flexibility, and this plan is a phased-in plan, but I think less is more possibly. Totally support not moving the bowling club. I mean, we had very strong submission and very strong support yesterday for maintaining the bowling club in its position where it is now. And there's a lot of people attend that bowling club and it's got a lot of history attached to it that needs to be recognised, I think, and not just bumbled along. So that would be my feedback, is less is more, and build it so that we have flexibility.
Mr Mayor.
Yeah, I didn't mention paths before, but Councillor Cameron jogged my memory on it. And there's one path that heads down Walnut Avenue. So, well, it's Walnut Avenue, yeah. One submitter suggested no, but reading the submissions and for the people who weren't heard, they did say yes, and I could see that path linking with other paths around. So you could, if there's young people with children and prams, then it would link and create a circuit for exercise. I could see that path being a need, especially on Walnut Ave.
Councillor Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things I missed as well when I was trying to explain what I can see. The hub to me is quite important because that's going to be the people's link. On the moment, the domain has been set up around the car park. This 30-year plan makes sure that the car park is just second to the people. So with an hub through the middle and a path through the middle, that is going to be the direction. So it's a people park, not a car park. While we're talking about the bowling club, yes, like I said before, I'm quite happy to have them there for a while longer. I certainly don't see them shifting that quick. But in the 30-year plan, I can certainly see them sitting on another place. Might be in the domain. I hope to stay in the domain. But I mean, 30 years is a long time. And a landscape plan is a living plan, so it can always change. But you need a direction. And I think that what I'm looking at is a direction for this council and this district to go forward.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. And I was just going to bring up about the bowling club. So their lease is until 2028, is that correct? And they said yesterday that they were quite happy with renewing the lease for another 10 years, which brings it to 2038, which is obviously just under 20 years away. Is that right? Have I got my maths right? Yeah. So I think if they're happy with renewing the lease for another 10 years, then if we wanted to look at moving the bowling club after that, that's still within our 30-year plan. So I think for the meantime, in the next 10 years, let's get a little bit of a hub going, whether it's not going to be a building, but something, just to see how it works, so that then it could morph into moving the bowling club in 20 years or so and making that a hub area. That's just my thoughts. I don't think we need to make a decision today about moving a bowling club if we don't need to.
Councillor Cameron, then Councillor Mackay.
Just a quick question for you, Paul. How does that sound to you? That sounds to me like delaying a decision when you need a decision now. Do you need a decision now with regards to the bowling club?
I think for the purposes of finalising a plan, we do need to know whether the bowling club is shown as it is now, or whether we're looking to keep it, to shift it within the domain.
Like delaying it 10 years is going to, yeah.
But I think it is a living document, and I'd imagine it would be reviewed every 10 years. So, these things do change over time. But I think there is a need for a hub. Now, if it's not where the bowling club is, I still think there is a need for something. And it may not be a large building. It could be a small building with a canopy to provide shade and shelter. So the actual form of the hub and what it contains is up for debate and testing. I don't think a cafe would ever go in there without testing its viability, talking to local operators, seeing whether it's viable commercially. But the idea of perhaps a canopy which you could park coffee carts or food trucks under on a flexible basis, I think that's got a lot of merit. If it was adjacent to the playground, you could co-locate things like changing facilities within that. So there's opportunities, I think, to look at if the bowling club was to stay where it is. I think, just commenting on the bowling club, it is quite a physical and visual block right at the heart of the domain. And I guess part of the thinking behind relocating it within the domain was to create more open views and connections right at the heart. It is a great spot, and I can fully understand why the bowling club loves it. It is in the best spot of the domain. So I completely understand where they're coming from.
Can I just make
Yep.
one further remark? I've got two questions, if I may. The first one is a comment. I think the bowling club's been around for about 125 years, so in 30 years' time it'll be around for 155 years, which is an old established building and club in Ashburton. And I think we need to acknowledge that and recognise it more than move it, in my opinion. My question, Paul, is how much extra hard landscaping is there in terms of metre squared in this plan as compared to what is existing at the moment?
I couldn't give you an exact figure. I mean, the main additions of hard landscape would be the new access road. In terms of pathways, I mean, we essentially are proposing, the main one is along Walnut Ave, a new promenade to provide both, footpath and cycle access, walking and cycle access along there, but also there's opportunities along there for adding things like, more planting. You could have fitness equipment, you could have table tennis tables and things. It could be quite an active promenade along there. Other paths that proposed in the plan are really just following desire lines, like between the Parks Depot and West Street. It's a bit of a no man's land at the moment, but people do walk down there. So providing a gravel pathway, we're not talking about asphalt everywhere, and keeping things within the character of the current domain.
Okay, I agree with the concept of the outlay of the aspirational of the domain. In my considered opinion, the road has to be off Walnut Avenue in and out for safety, and the entrance onto State Highway 1 West Street absolutely closed in the future. The bowling club stays, parking is enlarged, no building in the hub, but the hub created through activities for a people's hub, more parking, and maybe allowing a fence for the cricket balls as long as it's not intrusive to the landscape. The only other way to deal with cricket balls is put a string on it, but you've got to drill a hole. I don't think that's good bowling practice. So that's where I am. So I like the Mayor's suggestion. I think I'm with you all the way, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lovett, Councillor Brahm, and then we might look at giving guidance to staff.
I would say I support the bowling club staying where it is. It's got history. But I'm just wondering whether we could change the fence around it to a see-through fence that people around there can have a look and see what they're doing, because it is an activity and it is an attraction. And I just don't want to see them moved personally. And I think we need a hub space now for vehicles parking on for weekend sports, delivering ice creams and what have you. Whether that could, 30 years out is too long for this space. We need it now. And some of the submitters said we're looking 30 years out and some of these activities are taking too long to implement. You know, can we bring some of these more important, cheaper ones, into it? Just forget about the buildings, the bricks and the mortar, and for now, and bring in some of the other things. In the parks and reserves, I completely agree. Part or most of that should be taken out of the domain. A lot of submitters said it is an eyesore from West Street, and does it all need to be really there? And with all the park staff now parking and taking up car parks.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Hold on, I did something wrong here, push the button. I hear you saying that you understand that we want to keep the bowling club in the same place. I might have misunderstood you, but to me, in the first part you said you like the concept as it is, so we're a bit not sure where you want to go there. We're looking short term here. We are too scared to do any shifting. We are too scared to look towards the future. And yes, most of us won't be there at that time, but we are working towards the future. That's the reason I became a councillor. Not to look after myself, but the next generations. And that's what I want to look for in this plan as well. As I said before, I don't mind the bowling club being there for a wee bit longer. I don't want to push them out, but I think over a 10-year time, and I talk with a bit of Timber Reserve Board knowledge behind this. In 10 years, there's a lot of things that can change. We have a 30-year plan. When I came on the board with the Timber Reserve Board 10 years ago, everyone was dead against it. Over the last 10 years, we shifted the camping ground, we did bits and pieces, we've got a museum trust, everything else, and the whole thing starts to gel. And we're still working on the 30-year plan. What was basically thrown out 10 years ago because no one wanted to have it. This is the same thing. Change is always hard to accept, especially if you've been there for a long, long time. But this is a change for the future. It's not a change what is worse. I think it's a change for better. Could I ask a question to Paul? And that's about the bowling club, because I know that is a major one here. But looking through the admissions, there were quite a bit of submissions as well who were quite keen to get rid of it, so be aware. If we leave the club where it is on the moment, and the moment might be 10 years, what really annoys me is I can't look in. I can't see the space, what is a great space. Can we work that in the 30-year plan? Or is it a no-no with open fences or something like that?
I certainly would support some better visibility into that space, obviously acknowledging they'll have some security requirements. But I think there's other examples around the country. Paul mentioned Queenstown Gardens, they have a bowling club in their domain, and that is much more sort of open in view, and it becomes, I guess, more of an attraction. People can see what's there, and you can see through beyond that, so it's not such a block right in the middle of the domain. So I think there would be opportunity to improve that. I'm not sure if it's the right point. We have looked at alternative hub locations, and we have got some thoughts on that we could share with you when there's an appropriate moment.
Have councillors seen these alternatives at any time through the process?
No, they haven't, no.
Mr. Chief Executive, I take your advice. I think this is a big call at decision mode to actually introduce brand new material that we could have seen but haven't seen. I'll take your advice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. The decisions aren't being made today. So these, you're going to give staff a direction which will enable us to prepare the next iteration of the plan, which will come back firstly to the Community Services Committee and then to Council for decision. So this is giving us a strong indication of what to include in the next iteration of the plan, but this is not the final word. Secondly, I think as you consider submissions and issues that are raised, and as you contemplate how you deal with those, and as you contemplate contrasting views on a matter, then it's not wrong to think how you might solve that. And I think an alternative site for a hub to the one that you're currently debating is a perfectly legitimate thing to consider as you wrestle with where it might be. Because in reality, you've had feedback that the hub is, while not a building in many submissions, it's a good idea as a central place. The plan at the moment proposes that it be where the bowling club is. So if you decide to leave the bowling club where it is, but you like the idea of a hub, you actually have to contemplate alternative sightings for the hub, and therefore suggestions for your consideration here, I think, is entirely appropriate.
Okay, councillors, are you in agreement that we look at an alternative site for a hub this morning? Those, please raise your hand if you're in favour.
That's what we're here for, aren't we?
Okay. No, I think in all fairness, councillor, we have to check that we've got other councillors coming along with us. Otherwise, if it's just one, it's a waste of time. But we have us all, so let's have a look at it. Okay, Paul, where are you going to put the hub if we keep the bowling green?
We'll just pull up some plans on the screen there. So, can we go to full screen, Bert?
Yes. Sometimes. Thanks, Bert. You're just a step ahead of the rest.
Good morning, Councillor Wilson. All good in your life? Good. It's all back. We're on the air. So, okay. Is it Bert or Paul's going to hop up and explain to us on the map on the wall?
I can talk to this initially, and I'm sure Bert will jump in if he wants.
Okay, so you're not showing us on the map, you're just talking us through it, are you?
I can point from the screen here, I think, if I try not to point in anyone's eyes. Yeah, so I'll quickly run through this. There's a few more pages on the screen than you've got, but you've got the critical ones. So this current map on the screen is...
Sorry, order, councillors. Sorry, Paul, can you please start again?
Sure. So this is the existing domain as it is. On the screen you can see we've got the bowling greens here, playground and the existing car park. And then surrounding that you've got the existing parks depot, the aviary, the rose garden and the other sort of very heritage gardens, large mature trees, sporting facilities, or open field facilities to the north. If we jump to the next page, this is the current draft development plan proposal. So you've got the hub positioned where the bowling club is currently, providing that central point from which these other elements are gathered around. the new upgraded playground adjacent to that, the new water play area, so migrating the paddling pool down here with addition of other water play elements. The new access road coming in off Walnut Ave into the car park. And the intent of that would be to try and position it as close as we can to the existing trees along the cycleway, but obviously not so close as you start to damage those trees. On this plan we've got the reduced parks depot, so it's scaled back to just what needs to be in the domain to provide for the staff that will be working in the domain. So the area that's given up by that, the intent would be that becomes more garden space, demonstration and display, potential for community gardens or gardens that involve the community. A new car park area coming through. We've got a renovated aviary and wildlife garden, so making the shift from it just being an aviary and putting more of an emphasis on the broader wildlife, native plants, pollinators, some of the things we heard yesterday in the submissions. And then, yes, the hub. So if we go to the next page, this just gives you a sense of the current plan, but with the bowling club remaining. So you can see it does mean some changes are required. If you go to the next page. So yes, we have looked at a high level, some options for if you retain the bowling club, where a new hub could be positioned. And a number of these, all of these actually were raised by submitters. So we've tested some of these ideas and looked at pros and cons. Yeah, this is the first option is actually our preferred option, but we'll go through all of them. So the positive, this would position a hub adjacent to the car park, so north of the car park, adjacent to the water play, new water play and playground. So it's capturing that high area of activity for parents and kids coming to the domain. As I said before, it could potentially be, you could co-locate changing room facilities there. Let's grab my notes. Yeah, so in terms of positives of this location, it's got good visibility from the new access road, so people would arrive and it would be immediately obvious that this is sort of the arrival point and starting point in the domain. It's north facing, so it's going to get good sun most of the day. It's adjacent to the playground and water play area, so there's that having this on the same side as the kids playing is, you know, as a positive in terms of that. There was concerns raised about kids crossing the road, crossing the car park. As I said, the potential to co-locate facilities for the playground and water play area in this hub. It's still central to the gardens. It's close to, you know, the other historic parts of the garden, and it's serviced. It's adjacent to the existing car park, so there's a ability to service it relatively easily, acknowledging there's pressure on the car park in terms of numbers available, which is one of the negatives. So they're adding pressure to the car park. The existing trees may mean that it would lose some sun in the afternoon. It is separate from this sort of gardens area, so you've still got the separation from that garden side. You would need to adjust cricket fields, which we already are actually doing as part of this because of the access road. But retaining the two fields that the cricket submitters were keen on yesterday, and some tree removals would be required inevitably, I think, to fit this in. You carry on. I won't dwell on this plan much, but it's essentially just analysing some of the movement and connections. So you've got the yellow line as the vehicles coming in. The red lines are just how pedestrians might move through the spaces. So from the hub, how do they get to these other parts of the garden? So here you can see they're moving along the north side of the car park and then either side of the bowling club to get through to the things like the renovated aviary, into the gardens areas, things like that. And this just gives you a quick couple of photos showing you where that hub location is. So it's where the existing barbecue is, north of the new wellhead structure.
Okay, Councillor, thank you, Paul. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Sorry, hang on a minute. He's only given us 3 pages. He talked about 5 options.
So there's two more options I can talk to.
Have you finished?
No, I haven't. No, sorry. There's 2 more to go. I can speed up if needed.
No, don't worry.
No, I just thought we just all thought you'd stopped.
Okay, right. No, carry on, Beth. So the second option is at the current site of the aviary and the existing butterfly garden. So the intent here would be to create a clearing where the current butterfly garden planting is and have the hub facility facing onto that. So you've got an open space adjacent to the building, whatever form that might be, with the aviary integrated into that. So it sort of combines the upgrade of the aviary that's proposed in the domain development plan with the hub. So it's that idea of co-location again and multi-purpose facility. Again, it's north facing. It's adjacent to the new car park in the Parks Depot, so there's some benefits in terms of easing the pressure on the car park. The potential for co-location with the aviary upgrade and the new wildlife and demonstration display gardens where the Parks Depot is currently. It's still close to the other historic parts of the garden. Negatives, it's further away from the entry point. It's less visible, so people arriving are not going to immediately see where this is. So in terms of it being an arrival point, a starting point, it's not as good, I don't think, as the one near the playground. It's across the road from the playground and the water play, so you still do have that challenge of managing people and children crossing the entry road. It does reduce the amount of space available for wildlife, the wildlife garden and the aviary, but I guess the advantages are you can co-locate those. There might be some nice themes you could develop there. And like the other site, there are tree removals required to achieve this. So again, jumping through to this next plan, it just shows you how vehicles and pedestrians move in and around. So I guess the key things to note here is that movement across the car park and access road, and that people have to drive further in to get to this hub location. That couple of photos showing you the existing area. So this is the existing butterfly garden. That's, I must admit, in winter. It's winter form, so it's not looking at its best, but it certainly looks a lot more colourful and lively in its summer mode. And the third and final option would be to position it up at the close to the existing entry point off West Street, within the current within the current depot area. So the positives of this is that it's a relatively clear site at the moment. It's existing sort of gravelled area. It would be adjacent to the new car park that could be positioned there. It's close to Walnut Avenue, so there's potential some visibility there, although it is limited by the existing trees. And it could make the water play area, the suggestion of keeping the water play area in its current location would make potentially more sense if the hub was in this area. However, there's a few negatives. It's very far away from the new entrance and access road. People have to move a long way to get there. It's quite isolated. It's right close to the State Highway 1, so there's going to be noise issues there. And it would, if you did split this water play and the playground, it's creating two, people have to cross the road potentially a couple of ways to get from the hub through to the water play or the playground. So those are the three options we've looked at. As I said, the first one next to the playground and water play we think is the preferred option, preferred alternative to what's currently in the draft development plan.
Yes, Paul?
I'm done with my presentation, but certainly happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After asking why do we need a hub, I am now convinced that we certainly do need one. So the question now is, where is it going to be? And with these last presentations, I would favour the first option there. If there is some challenges with moving the bowling club, and it's obvious after listening to all the submissions that there are some challenges from the community about shifting the bowling club, perhaps we could look at making the bowling club more part of the domain and the gardens by changing the fencing around it, perhaps, so that it's more a part of the open spaces. And on the other side of the park, we would have the playground and the cricket field, and we'd be able to see the bowling club all at the same time. So there would be, in my very layman's view, a flow between the sports that are being played there. So instead of trying to shift the bowling club, why don't we look at trying to make the bowling club more part of the environment? And I'll talk about the aviary when we get to it, but I'd say do away with it.
Was all together, Councillor, would you like to talk about the aviary now, or is that going to be awkward? No?
No, well, I can. No. It's all right.
Okay.
Too late.
Okay,
Later on.
I'll try and come back to you.
No.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Cameron.
Just a quick question. How big is the hub, square metres?
Be as big as you want it.
What is it drawn at?
I've essentially at this stage drawn it at the same size as the bowling club building in terms of its built form, but really it's up for grabs how big that is and what form it takes. Bert's just brought up some imagery. This is a sort of idea if it wasn't a building, if one large building, which obviously comes with cost implications, there's the opportunity for perhaps more of a kiosk type approach with a covered canopy. So you're providing that information point, that small scale coffee or food, although that could be provided by food trucks, coffee carts as an alternative, but also that covered sheltered space for people to picnic under, provides that shade that was highlighted yesterday by the Cancer Society, that sort of thing. You want to just flick through these. So this idea of a covered space that is multi-purpose, could be used for things like markets or open days, that sort of thing, but has that small scale built element with it. For example, at the playground could be part changing rooms, part information.
It does.
Mr Mayor. Oh, sorry, councillor Cameron.
I think we're making progress.
We definitely are.
Yeah, I had a question yesterday, how many car parks we have. Did someone find out how many car parks are in the domain at this stage?
Yes, through the chair, there's roughly just over 100, including the bowling club ones.
Right, thanks. Looking at the new plan you put up there, Paul, or the three options, it could be a mix of them. I think the hub where you're suggesting the first one looks a good idea. I'm not sure about the play area there though. I think the play area may enhance the old paddling pool that is there in the future, add to the paddling pool that's there. We had submissions yesterday on leaving it where it was. So I'm not sure about having a play area right next to the playground. I don't know if they mix having a wet and a dry together. I don't know. Then the water play area in the winter will probably not be used because it's too cold. So having it down by the paddling pool and leaving the paddling pool there may be an enhancement. But we'll obviously hear more about that.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you, and yes, I like the first option. Just a question though, Paul, with the existing toilets on the corner of the Domain and West Street, they'll be retained? I don't see them in that plan, but they're the busiest toilets in Ashburton, and obviously for easy access reasons by buses, trucks, the general public.
Yep. Yeah, I have missed it off the drawing there, but the domain development plan doesn't propose to remove those toilets. They've proposed to stay.
Thank you. And I also, could I supplementary, I really like the idea of integrating the bowling club into the whole environment where it is, but I think a see-through fences and things would make it feel much more part of the hub, and I would hope the bowlers would feel the same way. Thank you.
Councillor Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can show the councillors and other people here what the changes are. If you look at this plan, what everyone seems to like, to me it's a wee bit of a cop-out, is that there is no really any clear walking lines. Paul, could you show the original one, the one or bird? You might see the difference there pretty quick, because it's still a big block in the middle, what's called the bowling club. That's the one. If you look at that area there, with the hub coming through, you've got all your lines there, so it connects to the new area. It connects to the offices in the new area there. It goes back into the domain, so you get all your different areas connecting through this hub. With the bowling club still there, you go around it. You still got something in the middle. What really is the second best choice? We might end up there, but I just want to make sure that you realize what you're doing. You start taking real great lines in a domain and walkways in a domain. You start spreading them out a wee bit further. That was my spiel.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I've just got a question, and I might have missed this. The new access way, is that one way coming in and then going out onto West Street? Is that correct?
The new access way is, well, in the plan as it states, as it currently is two-way. It also retains a left in, left out at West Street, which matches what NZTA had proposed as part of the intersection upgrade.
Okay, great. I do like the first plan with the hub there. I think the water play and the playground can be side by side. I mean, with climate change, Mayor Brown might be able to be in that water all year round. But, again, we look at Margaret Mayhew Playground because it's so successful and because it has that water play area beside the playground. I think that would be great. And water play, we could introduce something similar to what Edith talked about yesterday from Forest and Bird with the canals and the dams and that sort of play as well. So it might not just be squirting water pistols at each other. It might actually just be dams and having fun in the water. So, I think that's, with the bowling club being opened up a little bit, I think that's a great option.
Councillor Lovett.
I support the first plan, and I support the water play being put over by the paddling pool, because different people talked about zones for the different types of play to try and divide them up a little bit. And I actually think with the hub being central, where by the playground there, it is actually central to all the sports being especially winter sports being played on the ground. You're not too far to go and get a coffee, and parents can sort of have a coffee there and actually sit there outside and watch their kids play. So that will probably get a lot more business than putting it deep into the gardens. And if we can put some glass panels around the bowling green there, I think that would actually be good, because kids, people could actually watch them play, and it might entice them to go in the gate and have a game. And I think, and then go on and walk around the gardens. I think that's got potential. And with the aviary in the future down the line, I'd actually like to see the whole thing covered with but if we're going to keep it, put butterflies and birds in it like you see in other big gardens. But if you're going to keep them in those cages, I'd say get rid of them like everyone else.
Councillor Brown.
Just a question, Mr. Chair, if I can. Paul, in the plan, the puddling pool, what I call puddling pool, next to the toilets, that's not there anymore, is it, in the 30-year plan? That's disappearing from that corner, isn't it, for the right reasons?
My understanding is that that paddling pool needs some work. So I guess the question is, would you expend money on it where it is now, or do you build something new in the new location? The new water play could be a combination of paddling pool and more sort of, surface water play facilities, not the deep water which you need to then have a fence.
Yeah, of course, to me, a paddling pool next to a toilet block doesn't really sound right.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I'm just going back to the timeline. So the central hub wasn't due to happen until 2035. If we're going to relocate the hub to this map here and make it more of a canopy, which I think looks fantastic, I'm suggesting that we actually bring that forward quite a few years.
What's 34?
Or bring it closer to so looking at the timeline that was in the form, the playground is 1920, water plays 21 to 23, and then there's some water enhancements, cricket pavilion upgrade, park buildings upgrade, and then nothing until 2028. So I think the hub, the road is, so the promenade's to 2029, and, well, when is the road? Yeah. I think we need to sort of be thinking about the timeline as well, because, I mean, obviously the hub was 2035 because it was at the same time as the bowling club. Sorry, Bert.
Bert.
Yes, if I can just add some clarification. You may recall at the workshop that we had a different timeline in the original plan, but there was strong direction from councillors to amend the timeline to suit the existing budgets in the LTP. So that's why a lot of the projects are being pushed out to year 10, because they weren't provided for an LTP. There's some definite drivers in terms of new things like the new access road. I understand the Walnut Ave West Street intersection upgrade is scheduled for 2022. So that will definitely be a driver for change. We had the central hub, you're correct, it was 2028 at $2 million. Yes, no, 2028. And I've got the condensed version, but if the alternative hub was located, we'd have to review that cost figure. It would probably be reduced from that $2 million.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I suggest that once we've got the general sense of where council is at on these projects, that we will look at that timeline? and have a fresh look at what flows from what. Clearly, if the bowling club is to remain, then the doing things in that space and the expiry of the current lease is a lot less relevant to the timeline and other projects. And of course it does, as Bert implied, dovetail in with the long-term plan and all sorts of other financial commitments across the range of council activities. So there's a bit of work in that for us, but rather than try and solve each project right now, once we get council's direction, we'll have another close look at that timeline and think how it fits both with the need for this plan, but in the context of the long-term plan.
Mr. Mayor.
My thoughts exactly. We're doing a long-term plan shortly. We get this plan developed up and what we want there, then put the timeline over the top of it. Looking at the road, it would have to be done with the lights at Walnut Ave, State Highway 1, West Street. So they will have to be done at the same time because the NZTA have talked about left in, left out onto the highway. So they are forcing us to put the other road in, and when they force us to do something, the appropriate funds should come with it.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Latham, you were coming back for a supplementary about a quarter of an hour ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure whether we're going to discuss this more fully, but my thoughts about the aviary is that we should do away with an aviary. In these days, not comfortable with housing wildlife and birds and whatnot, so that's just my personal opinion.
Rest assured, sir, we will come to the aviary. Councillor Wilson, you've been very quiet. You are allowed to comment if you wish to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, this is new to me, this plan here.
It's new to us also.
And I've read all the submissions. I actually like the hub on the other side near the playgrounds. Also, at Christmas time, people have family picnics on the Royal Lawn on that's straight directly below the hub there. Well, they can just go to the water play or have family picnics, they have barbecues, and it's all sort of in that general area, because especially in summertime you see a lot of families picnic on the Royal Lawn under trees and stuff in there. I favour that plan actually.
Okay. I've been making the odd adding up note here, and at the moment I've got 6 of us have actually totally agreed with the plan that's on the wall at the moment, with other decisions around the outside of it. So do you think we could talk about this all day? I've got no problem with that, but would you like, shall we settle on maybe what's on the board now as a base to work forward? Would anyone object to that? Councillor Brown.
Yes, I do, Councillor. As I said before, it's a 30-year plan. We're going for a quick side step to keep the bowling club where it is. I think it's short-sighted. I won't be able to stop it, but the original plan, what was shown there before, is the best, and we go for second best. We could have best, but it thinks it's going to be sideways, but I'm against it.
Okay, who else is against it? So have we got most of us in favour that it's a base only to work from for the future, not set in concrete? Is that where we're coming from? Pardon? Living document, yep, cannot be set in concrete. Mr. Chief Executive.
I've no doubt there will be changes over 30 years, but what this plan does is it informs how we go about planning projects in the domain. So it may change over that time, but This will mean that anything we are doing in the domain over the next 30 years will be consistent with the proposed layout of facilities. So we will be quietly working away consistent with this plan. So that's the purpose of the plan, to guide our investment decisions over the next few decades. So yes, it's a living document, and there may well be changes in the detail over that period. In fact, you could almost guarantee it. But we won't be starting to challenge the plan from day one just because we agree that it might change. This will be the guiding framework for ongoing development and initiatives in the domain.
Okay. Is anyone uncomfortable with that guidance from the Chief Executive apart from Councillor Brown? Does anyone wish to make any further comment? Bert?
Just a point of clarification for Paul's sake, who'll be drafting the plan. It'd be good to get some clarity about whether this alternative option is a long-term option or just a temporary one.
I actually, the way I read it, I believe that this is a long-term option for the 30 years. And I thought the Chief Executive had made it quite clear that this would be a base, sure it would be a living plan, but it'd be a base document to work from. So I don't believe I've got it wrong, but correct me, Mr. Chief Executive, if I am wrong.
No, but if it was unclear in anyone's mind, then the question's worth asking. But for me, this is the long-term plan for the domain. So if we say that's where the hub is going to be and the bowling club's staying, then our behaviour and investment decisions and recommendations to future councils will be consistent with that framework. Now, that's not to say that in 25 years' time we get an approach from the bowling club that says, we want to do something else, and of course the council of the day would consider that. But our own planning and our own decision making will be on the basis of the framework that you're discussing and considering right now.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Angus, there's lots of other little projects going on in this plan outside of this as well, so we're going to discuss them shortly.
Yeah, we're going to have to come round back to this because there's side issues such, dare I say it, as an Avery. And,
and I think we talked parking, on the parking one, I think parking is another iteration of
there's
parking.
a whole list that we'll do after this.
Good.
Yep. Well, that's the way I plan it. Yeah. Councillor Cameron.
Just a quick comment. I don't believe that this is the second best option. I think we've discussed the option proposed initially, and I think this is the best option. It's a refined option. It meets the main requirements, and we're preserving our history and acknowledging our history, and I don't see how in any way that can be the second best option. And I just wanted to just...
That was my personal view.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I said at the start of the meeting that I was going to try and keep it as informal as possible because this is giving direction to staff. And I also said if it got tight, I was going to revert to formality. If everyone's still happy that I stay as informal as possible, but the guidance to staff and the guidance to us for future decisions today and in the future is that map that's on the wall. I have one councillor objecting. Is that enough guidance for you to proceed with, Mr. Chief Executive, or do you want us to make it formal?
No, that is very clear, that guidance, and we will progress accordingly. Noting, of course, that the next iteration of the plan will still come to the Community Services Committee and then the recommendation for consideration / adoption by full council. But we think the direction from this discussion is very clear.
Those that are in favour of the base document, which is a living document, on the wall, please raise one hand only. Can it please be noted that there was one objection to that? Do you want that recorded, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it is.
Brave enough to do that.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Could I just make a comment for those, there'll be obviously a lot of people watching this live streaming, that would you like to just explain exactly clearly what we've just done in as much as the bowling green and the situation of the hub, because remembering those watching can't see the map unless you've got it up on the screen.
Fair comment. Okay, who's taking the challenge? Is it me, Tony, or Chief Executive? Okay. Can people stop me if I get it wrong straight away, please? The bowling club stays as it is. There'll be a two-lane road in off Walnut Avenue to meet with the trees. The hub will be on the left as you drive in, and it'll be between it's near the water plan, it's near the playground, north of the car park itself. The cricket fields are okay as per the Cricket Association. We still have a number of decisions to make. The timing issue, especially when there might be we favoured a covered hub to start with, as against a full building. What have I missed? Nothing. As a base document. Happy, Councillor? Thank you. Okay. Well, now we better move on to the aviary. Was on Councillor Letham's itinerary, and it's a side issue. Hang on, have I got that right? So it's done the central. Hang on, we've done the central hub. We'll go back to the book. It's done the central hub. Well, we've handled page 15. I'm turning over 31. We have discussed that the central hub will not necessarily be a building as such to start with a coffee machine. Are we all agreed on that? That it's not a actual physical building built straight away? Okay, yes.
Could I suggest
Yep.
that we have a 15-minute break for a cup of tea, and you and I and Tony will just compare notes as to where to from here. Are you happy with that?
Okay. Councillors, we have 3 lists, one by me as chair, one by Tony to work through, and one by the Chief Executive. So how about all of you have 15-minute cup of tea, and then we'll come back. And we'll be more highly organised, because the book that I was working from has perhaps been superseded a wee bit with our decision. Okay, adjourned for 15 minutes. welcome back everyone, and I reconvene the discussion. Now, we've decided on an agenda, and the agenda is on the first page in to the document, and it's headed Table of Contents. And I did jump the gun by going to the ovary, but we'll actually go back to the playground on page 26. We're doing that so that we can give all submitters a chance that their submission will be considered in whatever way you choose to consider it. So if we can go to page 26, and first sentence is, draft plan proposes playground is upgraded over time as maintenance and natural upgrades occur with natural and botanical themed structures. Are you still all in favour of that, or due to the submissions do you wish to make any changes to any part of the playground? Or do you want the planners to ask what questions they need to further the plan? Paul, Bert? No, yes.
No questions from us.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I was just going through some of the submissions, agreeing with having trampolines in the ground, having the flying fox put back up, and I also, there's a point there about features for disabled community, wheelchair, etc. And a lot of our playgrounds in the district have the bark down, which is not wheelchair friendly. What was the idea for this playground area?
Paul?
So at this very high level of the development plan, it's pretty much up for grabs how that playground is designed, but certainly I would support making it more accessible, and the intent is really to use some of what's there now and then add to that. So we're not sort of starting again, but we're building on what's there.
Okay. Mr Mayor.
I reiterate all that Councillor McMillan said. I think she's got it spot on, reading those submissions. So we have, is it 200,000 for playground equipment upgrade this financial year in the domain? Yeah, so that's part of this. So it's getting the right equipment, what the people are wanting in there really. Yep.
Through the chair, that'll be predominantly getting a good plan and then implementing that plan this year. Yeah, part of that plan. 200,000 won't go anywhere near what would be required to implement a full playground upgrade, but it will form the bones of the start of that.
Okay, Councillor Lovett.
I would reiterate what Liz said, and yeah, with the flying fox trampoline, but the kids' pump track, it's very well used. There's often too many kids on it. And I see through here that it was asked if it could be extended and a few more bumps put into it. And there was a comment also made about adventure playgrounds, not all just made of natural stuff. Kids want to be challenged today, and they asked, could we look at Australia, what they do in their parks, because a lot of their playgrounds are very good. Please, have a look at that and bring some concepts here.
Councillor Cameron.
That was exactly the point I was going to make. I think we need more challenging activities and not just, basic equipment, and more sort of natural type of playground equipment.
Councillor Rawlinson, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed in a couple of them there was they asked for a play area for disabled children. That is something that I would love to see, if that's a possibility, because those ones need challenges as well.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. I basically agree with everything that's been said, but also noting there that important to keep the little old tractor, keep it nicely painted. An in-ground trampoline, the flying fox, yes. And this is, we took the slide down, the old embankment was crumbling or something, but I think people are often asking, can we have a slide back? I don't know how health and safety goes around slides, but they're fairly popular, so that was something I'd like to add to that list. Thank you.
Okay, just to make sure everything's been covered, who is going to help me just what we decided to do? Is it Carol or is it Tony or? Because Councillor Abraham talked about a slightly different type of playground might be required for some sections of our community. So is that in or out after our deliberations on this subject?
So the direction I thought I heard you giving staff was to look to develop the playground plan to incorporate some more wheelchair-friendly disabled access equipment in there. The actual details of the equipment is probably more up to the experts to provide in terms of
Depending on funding.
Depending on funding and things like that, but certainly to have some challenge and to provide some a more natural-based play.
I'll come back to you after every topic. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. Water play on page 29. Exactly which water play is this on that map? Pool?
So this is referring to the left-hand side of the playground. So so it's this area there. That's
Okay.
what's proposed.
Sorry? Okay. Councillor Lovett.
I would just like to make a point. I would like the paddling pool kept, please, with its fence for the little children. I've been asked this by a lot of mothers because it's the first opportunity little toddlers can actually put their feet in the water safely with their parents and learn to float in water, and keep it fenced and put the water play right beside it, and the fencing should keep the bigger kids out so the little ones have got security, because it is a well-used paddling pool over there, and I don't mind it being shifted over to the new spot. Yeah.
Well, okay, sorry, I should have read out what the sentence said. It's exactly what you want, so. Draft proposals replacing the pool with new water play and paddling area next to playground. All happy with that? Councillor, Mr Mayor.
I thought that Councillor Lovett wanted the new water play area beside the paddling pool that's there now, and leave the paddling pool there.
Okay.
I thought I'm in support of that as well, the paddling pool there. But I think the Cancer Society said that it needs a bit of shade over that paddling pool, or over whatever it needs, wherever it is, it needs shade.
Okay, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I'd like to see the water play area, including a wee paddling pool, moved beside the playground. I think, and with some shade, and I also think if we could somehow incorporate, the dams and the rivers and the other kinds of water play, and would be fantastic as well.
Okay, Councillor Abraham.
I would certainly shift it. That corner is just going to be a busy corner with traffic lights, all the bits and pieces there, and there's still a toilet. So let's just call it a toilet block, and the pools are coming this way.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. I agree mostly with what Councillor McMillan said, and I am happy to see a little paddling pool integrated in the new water play area. And I think it's important to keep a paddling pool because we have a lot of families who simply can't afford to go to the EA Network Centre, even though the costs are reasonable, but it's a fact of life that they can't, and this is their option to get in a little pool and also have it in an outdoor experience.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
Given we have to repair the paddling pool, and given it's not in a great location on the corner, I also support moving it. It would be good if the water play was at one end of the playground and the dry play, if you like, was at the other end. But when you look at the Margaret Mayhew, which we seem to be using as a sort of an exemplar, how is that contrived? Is that all sort of mixed up together, is it? Or is that...
It's part of one, but the water play area is kind of co-located. It's together, and then
Yeah,
the other
yeah.
dry play is around it. So it is sort of separated.
Talking about the wheelchair accessibility, I mean, that's got that sort of magic carpet stuff on it, hasn't it? Synthetic sort of.
Yeah.
So that would be clearly, easily replicated.
Mr Mayor?
What is the problem with the existing paddling pool, and what's the extent of the repair and likely cost?
Through the chair, I'm not sure any detail around any issues the pool has at the moment, but it is 42 years old. You would expect that a pool like that might have a life of 50 years, so it's not unreasonable to think that the pool might need to be substantially repaired or replaced in the near future.
Okay. Summary, Tony?
So in summary, the key points that you're discussing with the water play feature is the location, whether it's to be kept where it is as a paddling pool or moved down to the central hub. It sounded like there was a preference to head down towards the central hub, but I'll take your guidance on that. And
All happy with that? No. You went like this, Mr Mayor. Okay, Tony, sorry to interrupt. Let's clear that up. Yeah, they're happy.
And the caveat being with the water play area to make sure that it does incorporate some form of a paddling pool to keep that experience for young children. Sorry?
Okay.
And fenced, yes. Yep.
Okay. Councillor Latham, I'll let you go first. The Aviary, I'm sorry I kept you so long, sir.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thank you, Mr Chairman. I really have nothing further to add than what I said. I am not comfortable these days in housing wildlife in small areas. The aviary has never been that exciting. It's never been that popular, and I think we should just do away with an aviary completely.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Cameron. I'll have to go. I've got to follow through this mechanical stuff. Mr Mayor.
I agree with doing away with the aviary. It's not probably PC today to have an aviary and birds inside, but what we should have is plantings that attract native birds who voluntarily come to our domain and make it attractive.
Councillor McMillan.
I was leaning that way yesterday, but after looking at the submission booklet with the lovely plans of the aviary and making it sort of not really look like an aviary, just a sort of a walkthrough with birds, I think that would be my preferred option, although I do like Mayor Brown's suggestion of planting to attract native birds as well. But I think often if you're thinking about Willowbank or somewhere like that where they've got quite a decent sized aviary, birds are attracted to other birds as well, so they may come anyway.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
I've got 3 questions.
Go for it.
Can I just hark back to the fencing of the paddling pool? Does a paddling pool need fencing?
Yes.
It was only, I thought it was 1.4.
Yeah, 0.4.
0.4.
I think it is from memory.
Okay. Because it's a little bit of a barrier in the playground, isn't it? But anyway, yeah. Sure. Okay, so the point is, I think it would be a given that you're going to plant plants and trees that are going to attract birds. I'm assuming that's in the planting plan.
Yeah, the intent for the aviary upgrade was to make it a wildlife garden. So it's more than birds. It's about native plants. It's about the biodiversity.
I personally love those big aviaries, those big, huge ones that are like bigger than a big sports hall. And you open the door and you walk in, and it makes it more. You can feel closer to the birds. I mean, they seem to be. Yeah, and you walk around, and I think they're wonderful. And I think the kids like them, and they get more of a sort of an experience with nature, if you like, that they may not otherwise have.
Sorry? Ooh, Councillor Rawlinson.
On that note, I think the aviary in its form needs to go. It's been the subject of many a criticism. If we get criticisms of the domain, it's around that aviary. And I've seen some beautiful aviaries in South America and agree with Carolyn that an aviary well done is an asset. But that's not, we're looking at having here as a really big structured aviary, and I would prefer to just see trees planted that attract the native birds that we have and not have birds in cages.
Councillor Lovett.
My opinion is, personally, is to get rid of the aviary in the meantime and look down. We're planning for a 30-year. Look at down the track. down the track. Look at this, the great big aviary aspect where you can have some birds, have butterflies. When we've got all these aged care homes around there, they'll be able to come across the road and take their wheelchairs in there and be in a lovely environment with butterflies and birds. But until we can afford to do that, just get rid of the aviary in the meantime.
Councillor Brown.
Just a couple of questions, if I may. What do you see as an aviary there? Because, I like, Carolyn, I like that idea. I've been in Timaru over the years with the children. They loved it. It's a big thing with the trees in it, just in close to the sea. So, how big is that area? Can we fit something in what looks like a natural aviary type thing?
It's a pretty sizable space if you include what's currently the butterfly garden and the aviaries themselves. And you've already got that shade house which was converted into an aviary as well. So I think there's certainly space there to develop something of reasonable scale if that was the desire.
Okay. For that reason, I'm quite in favour for it, because it is quite nice for young children. But yeah, the way it is presented on the moment is not the way I would like to see it.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I see in the date line it's 43 to 45. So we can be in favour, but I mean, that's 25 years away. And who's the Bowling Green site could be available then? I mean, to say we need one or not, I think is a bit superfluous, really. We could leave it in, but 25 years away, who knows? It could be perfectly illegal to keep birds like that. I mean, safe as they call themselves against save animals, I see you're not allowed to cook crayfish now because they're hurt. So, I mean, it's just going to get, who's to know? I'd leave it in, but it's so far away, it's not going to worry me.
Councillor Brown.
Just going back to a previous conversation we had around the table, I understand that the timelines are going to be rehashed. Is
correct.
That, so it might be in the next 5 years. Is that correct?
What, that the aviary comes out?
Now, if the aviary comes in and we say we'd like to have a nice big one, that might be coming forwards. Is that correct? We're not, the road will be the first time, but I mean, the staff will.
Mr. Chairman, again, it guides our 30-year thinking in the domain. So, what I'm hearing, and Tony may summarise slightly differently, but what I'm hearing is that in its present form, there's no support for the aviary as it is. So that's fine. We can deal with that, and in the fullness of time, plan a more modern and wildlife aviary. And so what we would be essentially doing is we were reserving that space for that. So in the meantime, we don't put a bandrit under there, because it was always intended to be a wildlife garden for birds and butterflies. And so that's what the purpose of this FLAM is, a framework to guide our investment decisions over the next many decades. So we would be reserving a space. In the meantime, we might plant some, natives and get native birds and butterflies and moths and to be attracted to that area in the meantime. And when it is time to put a structure in place, then the council of the day will consider that amongst all the other priorities that you have at budget time and decide to do it or not at the moment in time that it seems appropriate. But in the meantime, we're not doing something else that means that becomes a problem when we come to consider it.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
This may be out of order, and it's just a quick question. Round the table, nobody likes the current aviary, and everybody wants it to shut. So, can we get rid of that ASAP?
Yes, we should be able to.
Well, yes. I mean, we're getting that clear sense from this discussion that that doesn't find favour with people, so we'll need to plan that as well. We need to rehome the birds, and we need to demolish aviaries and replant and all this. There's still a project in that, but we are getting a clear direction from council. I think that there's little support for the aviary in its current form, and that's reflective in the feedback. The feedback is saying those aviaries now don't particularly appeal, and some people want them gone altogether, and some people want a new modern kind of wildlife aviary. That's so your thinking's consistent with the feedback, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, there's two decisions to make. One is we're around the existing aviary, and one is about a new aviary sometime in the future. So, and one I don't see is going to stay there until the new one is developed. There could be a gap of nothing there. I think that's what we're indicating, and the timeline will come up in our LTP. So there's two decisions. Okay. One is get rid of the aviary, which I support, and the second is develop another aviary at some other stage.
I actually agree with you. Tony, in summary?
Everyone's done the summary for me, so it's great.
Right, good.
But I guess, so that the first decision is clear, you still want that space for a wildlife area in the future? Yes, okay, and we'll work that into the timeline.
And we want a nice garden with butterflies, attracts birds. Sorry? No. Okay. Parks Depot. I actually support the submitters that would like the depot moved. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss where we move it to. There will have to be, in my mind, a small depot there at the size to make it efficient and practical to work the domain. But I don't think we should go into where it's moved to, but if it's moved, I think is the decision we have to make. Who's first? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. And just noting, one of the submitters has said they support the replacement with a glasshouse propagation for educational purposes. So I agree moving it, but leaving some of the it there, if that makes sense. Yes. And sort of tying it in with the domain and the garden, so it's sort of a educational, or people can go and have a look and see what's happening and propagating. I don't know whether that will work or not, but that's...
Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with your summation. We should just steadily work to removing as much of the Works Department as is needed or as possible from that area. And as for what remains there as glass houses or greenhouses, that's something that can be discussed at a later date, but I'm certainly in favour of downsizing the area of the footprint there.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
So also support those two recommendations, that the Works Department there is scaled down to just for the domain activities, and move the other to some other location, which staff will come to us at a later date with. And the timing again will be in the LTP.
Yep. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm quite disappointed, councillors. It's an historic site. It's been there for a long, long time. And we come to throw it out? But we leave the bowls. I don't understand this. But I will support this as well.
Gee whiz. Chief Executive?
Yes. No, we're hearing that general direction. There is some detailed thinking and some cost in this, as you could imagine. But we're hearing the overall desire that it be domain worker only down there, and a different place for the balance. So we'll give that some thought. That will take some thought. But the general direction, consistent with the 30-year plan, is pretty clear to us.
Okay. Tony, you.
I think it's really clear on this one. Yes.
Thank you. We now move to Walnut Avenue Promenade. Hang on, have I jumped one? No? Okay, a broad shared pathway for both pedestrians and cyclists is proposed along the length of Walnut Avenue to the park edge. The path would contain nodes of activities such as existing fitness trail, public art, sculptures, gardens and seating. And we had a person across the road come in and say, no, it would spoil the view. That's one submission. Okay, Councillor Latham.
I support the proposal, Mr Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
I support the proposal too. There was a comment made by the submitter in question yesterday about not putting some concrete edgings along the path, and I tend to agree with that because we want to keep it looking natural, but we could do some small, short, low-growing native plantings perhaps along that promenade, which will be a deterrent for kids running on the road from parents. But there's already a walking group that walk there regularly, and I think there are some evening walking group that use the domain, and they do use that area, and I totally agree with having a promenade there. Just how we construct it will be worked out in the future.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, and I agree as well. I think this is going to be almost the best thing about the domain along that way with the promenade, and I think we had some presenters yesterday saying some native planting in that area would look good as well. So yeah, I think it's great.
Right. Mr Mayor.
At the moment, there's deep guttering along Walnut Avenue, which prevents cars from entering the domain because you just can't get through it successfully. So I think there's some plan somewhere for that guttering to be replaced, like what happened on, I think it was Will Street.
Right.
There was deep guttering there, and that the new guttering went in, and cars could mount the footpath and ended up in the croquet club. And their fence has been put up to stop that. So I would think it would be all developed together if that deep guttering was going, the path goes in, and a fence goes up to keep the vehicles out as well. So it's a combined thing. Again, timing, LTP.
So you're in favour of it principally happening? Okay. Tony? All good? Okay. New entry and access way. NZTA are looking to change the Walnut Avenue. I'll come to Councillor Mr McCann in a minute. He might like to make comment on this. It will not be possible to turn right into the current entranceway with the traffic lights. Draft plan therefore suggests new entranceway is built on Walnut Avenue to currently tree lined by Cricket Field. You may have some pertinent information, Mr McCann, on that.
Yeah, through you, the Mayor. The Walnut Ave intersection work is due to start in the new year. NZTA have met with us, and they are in the early stages of preparation and preliminary design. So as part of that whole project, the changes to our entranceway at the domain, it is involved with the traffic issues relating to those intersections. So we will have to change our entrance to left in and left out only. And as part of that, that would then require and involve that separate entrance off Walnut Ave into the domain. So certainly once we start engaging and discussing details, we'll be discussing it with NZTA and bringing forward that entrance as part of the project.
Okay, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, and I think we discussed it before, but the sighting of the road to not use up too much field green space is critical. So, and I know you've got to be careful of the trees. You don't kill them with putting the road there, but yeah, a wee bit of good planning and it'll work well.
Okay, Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Seeing we are being encouraged or almost forced to do this in the not too distant future, is there any funding available? Because the NZTA say they're going to do that and we have to make another entranceway. Do they provide any funding or anything?
Mr McCann.
That's certainly what we will be discussing with them because it is related to their project. So, yep.
Okay. So, having read all of the submitters' concerns, are you happy that we proceed with the draft plan of the Walnut Avenue Road subject to the parameters put around it. Is that a good summary? Thank you.
Mr Chairman, could I
Yes,
just ask one
yes,
question?
Councillor Latham.
Left out and left in off West Street, would that not be better to be sealed off completely once the new roadway is put in? It will stop a circuit for young, reasonably unintelligent young men to go round and round there at night.
Intelligent or unintelligent? Mr McCann?
That does provide access to the toilets, public toilets, is commonly used for that purpose. Whether we could close it or look at some restriction beyond the toilets is probably something we could look at.
Mr Mayor?
I see FENS, Fire Emergency New Zealand, got a submission there about the design development within with that road. Is that something that they would have an involvement with? Yeah.
Mr McCann? Would they?
I'm picking they would be looking at just accessing any fires in the domain from that aspect, but we can certainly look into that.
Yeah. Seems strange, but...
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. And someone asked yesterday about having gates on the domain so that they're closed at night. Would West Street be the obvious place to have a gate so that you can get the traffic in and out? So say it closed at 10 o'clock at night or something like that. I don't know how that would work, but that could be an idea.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll make a note of that, Mr Chairman.
Tony?
It seems like there's fairly good consensus on this, and we'll look into the gates on West Street as well.
And the road is all good?
And the road, yep. Makes sense to me.
Can I just say
Yes,
something?
Councillor McMillan.
Sorry. So there was a submission from Phoenix Preschool about supports the inclusion of a crossing outside Ashburton College. Now, is that in the plan?
Paul?
I can't imagine it's in the domain plan, but is it part of?
Paul?
It's not shown as part of the domain development plan, but I think as part of that broader discussion with NZTA and the traffic design that would be required, that sort of thing would fall out of that pretty quickly, what's required there.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr Chairman. I'm opposed to gates. I mean, it's a public space. Surely, we're a lot of sports really, aren't we? Shutting it all up at night.
Councillor Cameron?
Idealistically, in an ideal world, I think you're right, Stuart, but really I think we need gates, because people who congregate there'll be all sorts of goings on. I think we just best to lock them at 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Yes, Stuart, you missed it yesterday, but we had a bit of a discussion, or there was a person here who works in the domain, and he would almost be too scared himself to go through the middle at night time. So, like I said, we did at the Till Domain. It's open for the public to use the public toilets. You can walk in and on the bike with no cars. We had 1 week of language yelled towards the manager's house and honking of the horn. Since then it's been quiet and there's no hassle in the domain. And you still can walk in and out.
Councillor Rawlinson?
Thank you. Just going back to the crossing on Walnut Avenue, it was under the speed limit review. We talked about looking at putting some safe zones opposite the college gates because of the access there. And I think yesterday it was said that there was a pedestrian crossing opposite the Rosebank, but is there an actual pedestrian crossing, or is it just the safe zones in the middle of the road, isn't it?
It's a safe zone in the middle.
And if we could replicate that up by college, would probably add to making it a bit safer when all those kids pour out of college at 3 o'clock. It's a nightmare.
We can have we get the roading team to look at that.
Councillor Wilson, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. No, I'll accept your gates. I obviously come from a more innocent age, don't I?
Well, we can discuss it.
Okay. Tony, have you got gates there?
Yes, I have gates.
Good. We now move to pedestrian crossing over State Highway 1 at Will Street Corner to improve the connectivity between town and domain. Push button crossing the State Highway 1 bottom of footbridge, or at minimum pedestrian refuge. Who actually makes that decision, Mr. McCann? Is it
State Highway,
Highway
Mr
1?
Chairman. Yep.
NZTA?
Correct.
So, councillors, if you wish to follow this submission through, it's going to mean that we'll have to make representation to NZTA. I'll leave that with you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we should be asking, if we want to do it, just ask them. If we don't do anything, we won't get it. We might have to ask. It might not happen. It might.
Okay. Councillor Rawlinson.
And following on, my question was to Mr. McCann, have we had some form of discussions with them already?
Yes, I can confirm this has been raised several times over the past few years, repeatedly by council, and NZTA are very reluctant to provide another crossing. They believe people do have opportunities at the existing intersections, and with the intersection traffic lights going in at Walnut Ave, that'll make it easier for people to cross.
I would suggest that supplementary they try that, and also for people on mobility scooters. I was one a few years ago who went around town on mobility scooters, and getting across there, we went up over the overbridge over the railway line, came down and then sat there on that road down at the level of a mobility scooter to try and cross there didn't feel very safe, I can tell you. So it'd be great to see something done there.
Okay. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It will be a huge challenge to get a crossing on State Highway 1, which doesn't mean we shouldn't ask. But if we could get something, it would be great, because it would connect that east side of the town to the domain. I wouldn't be very optimistic, but I think we should try.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think we're wasting our time. I mean, there's going to be, as you say, upgrade at West Street corner. I mean, the Walnut Avenue corner. There's, at the library corner here, there's a pedestrian crossing. It is State Highway 1, and if we're going to have footpaths every 200 or 300 metres, people are just going to have to, even if you've got a mobility scooter, you're going to have to travel along a little bit, surely. So I'm opposed to even asking them. We could get offside with them if we got more important things we want to talk to them about. They say, oh, those niggly Ashburton people again.
Good. So, Tony, I think we leave it on the list to ask, even though Councillor Wilson is probably absolutely correct. Yep.
I just note, Mr. Chairman, Mr. McCann's comments that we've had dialogue with NZTA over the last few years on this very matter. So, in fact, we have already asked, and they've said no. So it would be asking one more time, and I'm sure Councillor Wilson will be right. We'll get the same answer. So when people say there's no harm in asking, of course there isn't, but we have already asked and had our answer. So we can ask one more time if that's Council's opinion, but in the end we have asked and had our answer.
Hands up for one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Yes, Councillor Cameron.
And while we're asking, can we also please ask them to replace the light on the bridge and tidy up their jolly land on the way through, please?
Okay, I think Mr. McCann heard you, but it's not as decision.
It's already been done.
Okay, move on. You right there, Tony? Yep, good.
So that's being
Move
left
on
in.
to Plaza. Proposes to push the curb line in road corner State Highway 1 and Will Street and reduce the size of the flower beds to provide more space for pedestrians round the pond edge. New seating, cycle park, planting proposed in this area. Right. Well, the Ministry of Education supports it. Michael Hanneran requests the pigeons are removed. Anthony Quaid is opposed. That's it. Sorry, Stuart?
For councillors, there is a map of the area up on the big screen now, for those just wanting to familiar yourselves.
Can Paul or Bert, can you just give us a description of, and another description of what you want?
Sure, yes, thank you. So the thinking here is to grab a bit of the current Wills Street road, so extend the curb out there to gain some more space and create a more formal plaza area, so that it's kind of your welcome point at the southern end of the domain. So it's the closest bit to the centre of Ashburton. It's the arrival point, and making more of the existing water feature there. The thinking is to reduce the scale of the existing flower beds, but to retain that idea, so we're not getting rid of them completely.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
So one more time, Paul. Basically, it's the corner where the pond finishes up on the bottom part that is getting repaved. Is that correct? So those gardens disappear.
That's right. I mean, this again is a very high level plan, but the intent is to create a broader paved space, which includes trees and gardens up to the edge of the existing wall.
Yeah. Along Wales Street, that's the part we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
It ties in with the crossing the road, and if you're not going to get that, then I don't think you'd do this. So I'd put it in year 29 of the plan.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. I just think that entrance with its flower plantings is one of the prettiest entrances into our domain, and it's photographed. You see it pop up in photos and calendars and all sorts of things, and I'm adverse to reducing the flower displays for that very reason. But as far as we're going to further discuss the waterways later, aren't we, about the edge of the pond? So, but that was just my point about I'd hate to lose that pretty entrance because it's such a pretty place.
Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like this plan. It's the first pedestrian, basically, entranceway into our domain, and I think as it's laid out there, it will be most effective and will give a pretty good feel to anybody walking into looking at our domain. So I would be very much in favour of pursuing that in its appropriate time.
Okay. Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm basically the same feeling as Roger, for the same reasons, because that's the first one you come to if you walk out of the CBD. Also, it connects the museum and the art centre on that corner. So to me, it has to be a wee bit more open to. I like the gardens, but I think the open space there shows the gate off, and it's easier to get into the domain.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I agree with Lane and Roger. I think it will be a good upgrade.
Okay. Councillor Cameron.
It is nice when you get to the park that you know you're walking into the park. And sometimes it depends what that paving is. If it's big grey tiles like you'd see in Cathedral Square or something, then that's pretty jolly unattractive. So it sort of depends that that's going to be sensitively handled and not just big pavers because they meet some sort of safety requirement. It's quite lovely to be in the park, you know. So I'm sort of hedging my bets there. I'd like to see it. But.
Mr. McCann, it looks like that next time you pull up Will Street and you put it back down, you're going to carry out some slight improvements there. Mr. Chief Executive, you comment?
If this stays in the plan, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, if it stays in the plan. I think the people... Tony, I thought we were roughly in favour of it, but we undecided where to put it, time-wise.
I think if I just draw your attention to the submissions and the staff comment that's provided, so acknowledging about the flower displays and that new flower display areas could be included within the plaza design to keep that sort of sense of history. So I was getting the feeling that you support the inclusion of this in the domain development plan with those new flower displays incorporated into the final design somehow.
Yeah.
Does you think that satisfy everyone's?
Yep, I think it does.
Okay.
Okay, waterway enhancements, Councillor Rawlinson, I think you said something before in the previous about this waterway enhancement. Or was it the pond you were talking about? Network of pathways around waterway, water's edge, broadwalk between the island and water wheel, addition of a fountain within the pond or southeast entrance to the domain, repair and strengthen work to pond edges where they are worn out, new planting along the length of waterway, existing wilderness area to the east of the old bathing pond, and both native and exotic plants. You were commenting before, but that's all right. Councillor Abraham first.
Sorry. Yeah, to me, most of that is just normal maintenance, really. It has to be updated and kept in good working order. So,
well, do you want the maintenance to work towards that more?
Just in play.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Rawlinson?
Yes, I tend to agree. Especially on the Will Street end, making some better edges in the promenade. My big concern is how are we going to keep them clean and deal with the birds? It's going to be the biggest issue there. But in principle, I agree with all the enhancements, but it's something to think about.
Councillor Brown, Mr Mayor may have the answer.
I don't not have the answer, but yeah, my question is, it's around the water quality in the ponds. People talk about it's not great. How do you fix that?
I mean, we have some control over the flow, that could help. You could possibly do plantings around the edges as suggested in the plan that would stop the sedimentation of when the banks erode, which is what we're getting at the moment. As to rubbish, it's pretty hard to deal with.
I think the water quality, people have talked about the quality of the water because the ducks are doing their business in there. And there was one suggestion from Edith Smith about planting a certain type of plant and the ducks don't turn up. Well, I'm not sure if that works or not, but there was a suggestion. Yeah, the waterway needs cleaning up. You put more water through it, obviously, but where does the water go to that comes out of the domain?
It goes underground through the stormwater network at that corner.
Stormwater?
From there, I'm not sure.
Stormwater or sewer?
Not sewer.
It's not the sewer.
Not the sewer, the stormwater. Okay.
Understood it was the sewer, but
sorry.
Understood it was the sewer, but could be corrected.
Councillor Wilson, can you tell us?
As far as I know, it goes down through our stormwater system.
Yeah, and we did have this question a couple of years ago, and we've sent cameras down to determine that. It would appear as if it goes down to the river and comes out, but yet what we saw was not the same colour of water that came from the pond. So we believe it goes down there, but we suspect it may end up going somewhere else. So we are continuing trying to dig up and send cameras down to find out where, if there's another off-take. We believe there's one other off-take under the roads, and we were hoping to incorporate that in our stormwater project down West Street.
Councillor Latham?
Perhaps, Mr Chairman, it all just goes down to Golden Pond somewhere.
Where?
Golden Pond.
Golden Pond.
Doesn't matter. Okay. With regard to the waterways, I like the idea, and I think it was Edith Smith that mentioned it, about choosing the right plantings along the edge of the ponds, and this stopped the mallards coming around or stopped them clambering up on the grass or whatever. So I'm not wholly in favour of native vegetation, especially The original vegetation of the Canterbury Plains is not terribly exciting, but I think there is a place there, and I note that the intent of the ADDP is for new planting along the waterways with native riparian plantings, and I think that's well worth looking at.
Councillor McMillan.
I was going to ask about the cricket balls. So they, when they spoke to us yesterday, said that the cricket balls are worth $150 each, and as soon as they end up in the drink, then they're gone. What can we do? Is there any way of sort of preventing that? Nets or?
We net for it.
Yeah.
No. Once they're in the water, they're worth less.
They won't let them use them.
Parks, Paul.
Yeah, it's through the chair. Excuse me. I had a look at that area last night, and it's reasonably raised to the waterway. I'm not sure that it's really a significant issue requiring fencing. If it did require fencing, the reserve management plan requires that fencing's done at the cost of the sports club. So it might be a matter for them to determine which is cheaper, cricket balls or fences.
At this late stage, I have a question. Landowners that have stock are requested to fence off waterways. Do we class stock as dogs, cats, and pet waterfowl? In other words, to meet the government's new water quality plan, does this pond have to be fenced off?
No, because pets in the domain are required to be on a lead. So pets are required to be on a lead, so they're under the control of the owner, so they don't enter the waterway.
Okay. Nice try. Tony, have you got a sense of direction?
I certainly have a sense that this project stays in the domain development plan. Lots of good conversation around the features, but I think they're captured within what the intent is within the plan as it is, so that'll be developed over time. I certainly don't get a sense that this is a project that you want to see urgently done when we're thinking about a timeline.
Okay, councillors, we're on page 44, band rotunda and kiosk. Draft plan includes a band rotunda and kiosk at the edge of the water to enhance the appeal of the southern corner. Comments from anyone? Councillor Ram?
That's the only thing I don't really need, to be quite honest.
So two councillors don't think it's necessary. Councillor Rawlinson?
I agree. I think band rotundas went out with the arc. And there is a nice space in the what they call the long lawn where the sculptures are that is a suitable sheltered place for musical concerts. But in saying that, it probably could be nice to have some form of just a covered structure where near the pond or in these waterways near Will Street where people could sit. I know there's seats there, but sit under cover or out of the sun and enjoy that space. But that's just in the longer term. But the band rotunda, I don't agree with.
Okay. Tony?
I'm not sure if it's the consensus of the group, but certainly get the sense of taking the band rotunda out.
Yes,
but this leaving the space that could potentially be a covered area in the future, is that something that council wants to see in the plan or not?
Hang on a minute, Councillor Cameron.
That band rotunda is currently proposed to be on the edge of the pond. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, it's close to the water's edge. Yeah.
So it could be blimmin' messy if you're going to have a band.
Keep the ducks out.
It's the same issue with the paving next to the waterway. It's managing the ducks. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be a performance space for a band, as in the olden days of band rotunda, but that broader idea of a space that's a bit of a gathering point and also a bit of a focal point for that southern corner.
Okay, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. So, in your drawings and the document, you had something similar to the canopy that we were looking at for the hub. So maybe even a smaller canopy and a seat or table or something under it would probably be sufficient, but that's just my view.
Okay. So, those band rotunda out, please put up your hand. Okay. Does it help you, Tony?
It does, so the band rotunda's out, but a space, is that still in?
Space, I think, is canopy space is still in. Councillor Cameron?
Do we want it in that location, paving and picnic tables or whatever, or a canopy and a barbecue area? Do we want it right by the pond? I mean, people go to the park, kids like to sort of pretend they're in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Year 28.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Put it in year 28.
Year 28. Okay. Okay, yes,
Yes, I'm perfectly
but
clear.
not quickly.
Not quickly, absolutely.
Okay, we now move to the west corner of the domain. A second entry point to the domain is proposed in the draft plan at the corner of Crick Street and Elizabeth Street, just south of the hospital complex beside Creator's House. Entrance would provide access. Can we just pinpoint, put the arrow on it, please, Bert? Right.
The intent is to provide access either side of the curator's house in and out into that old netball courts, so it could be used for car parking for events, that sort of thing.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Just some clarification, that the court is still quite usable for a car park, or does it need a lot of work? Is it completely new, or are we just proposing to use the existing part?
Through the chair, I think we'll need a proper assessment as to see what the condition of that is, but the intention is to use that space and the asphalt surface. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
I'm opposed to more car parks in the domain. I think there's plenty of street parking and plenty of places to park, and I don't want any, I'm opposed to that.
Mr. Mayor.
It's not adding more car parking, it's making, using a space that is not used anymore.
Yep.
For car parking if there's an event on, which in hockey came to us and they submitted that when they have tournaments on, car parking is scarce. So it would be opened up and used for that, I'd imagine, than any other event that's on in the domain, because the car parking on the roads is limited.
Councillor Latham.
I agree with the plan, Mr. Chairman. We do need that extra parking for hockey. I've also been privileged to be part of a big musical event in the Oval, and we had some North Island experts arrange it for us and arrange the lighting and the seating and all the technological things that had to be done, the big TV screens. And when they got here and they started to put it up, they were absolutely blown away. They said many times that that would be the best outdoor entertainment area they've ever seen in New Zealand. So on the odd occasion, and I hope in the future there'll be more, on the odd occasion when there is a big, for want of a better word, musical event in there, in the Oval, that car park will be vital.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
I support it because there's an existing part there now, so we're just going to give it a better use. And it looks pretty close to the potential bowling club site, but yeah, that might take a wee while yet.
Councillor Cameron.
Just a quick question for clarification. Is it just going to be open and closed for car parking when required, or not permanently open for car parking?
I think that's probably an operational decision, but that's the intent of the intent of the plan. It's there for events and open when required, not all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rawlinson?
Yes, I support that idea of the car park, and as I said yesterday, we need to do something about working out how we have that gate open so that that car park is available when it's needed, because it's been an issue for the hockey.
Okay. Tony, you're sorted on that?
Yep, very clear on that one. It'll stay in the plan. The usage of it in terms of whether it's event only versus having it open will be an operational decision.
I was just going to ask, do we need to make any decisions or talk about the curator's house at this stage, or do you think that can be, because there was an idea of using it as a gallery, is that correct? I see someone's opposing using it as a gallery.
Okay, Creators House, I'll put that on the list, we'll come back to it at the end, all right?
It's in that west corner of the domain, there's some comments in there.
Right, okay, we better handle it now then.
Other west corner projects, it says so.
Yeah, other with. Sorry? It's
Page 47. Yeah.
page 47.
Yeah.
So, can we handle it when we get to page 47, or are we there now?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's a reference on page 47 for a submitter who opposed the curator's house as a gallery. I think we're discussing that particular issue there. Submitter's submission was on page 78 of the summary of submissions.
78. I've got a different page 47 here.
It's on page 47 on our list, but it refers to a submission that's on page 78 of the submissions. So perhaps, Mr Chairman, we could ask.
What do you wish to do?
Could we ask Paul to comment on what is in this plan, so that's really clear, and then we can discuss whether we like it or not.
Okay.
On page 37 of the draft development plan document, it does keep it pretty flexible as to what that could be used for. It says there is a range of opportunities for the future use of the house, including a gallery space, events, and club hire space, or continuing use as accommodation.
Well, that's a good reason to keep it. Mr Mayor?
Yeah, I think leave it as it is. We've got enough cafes and restaurants and what have you in town now. We don't need another white elephant sitting out there. It's used, it's by council at the moment,
yeah,
and well used, so leave it as it is. Put it in year 26.
26, not 36. What about 36?
36, sorry, 36 of the plan. No,
Got some spare
it's a
spare
30-year
projects.
plan.
36.
It's a 30-year plan, so it's year 26.
36 or 26?
Just to comment through.
It's only 6 years away.
No, year 26 of the 30-year plan.
36?
Just through you, Mr Chairman, that house is extensively used operationally for us as an organisation when people come to visit or new staff come to town and have nowhere to rent initially while they're sorting themselves out. So it is a house that gets an amount of use. So its immediate future, our preference would be for it to continue in that capacity.
Tony, as is that right? As is, yes. Thank you. Pathway and bridge enhancements. Submit a support pathways improvements, etc., etc., etc. Do we all agree with that? Well, I do. If that helps you. I do. That we should always be improving pathways, etc. Mr Mayor.
We did have a submitter presented yesterday. I think they talked about too many pathways. So we just need to have the right number in the right place. And someone wiser than me can work out where that needs to be. But right pathway, right place.
Okay, no further comments? Tony? Okay. Feedback on other components of the plan. Okay, let's go through. I thought we had decided that when we made the decision on the aviary, that biodiversity should be a priority, using natives, etc., bird attraction plants. Yep. Was I right? And I thought it was also a given that we were going to see the wetlands actually featuring better diversity, biodiversity, and better planting around the ponds, etc., etc. Have I got that right, or have I got it wrong? No. Councillor Wilson. Oh, sorry, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I'm jumping to it about the flying fox. Can I do that now, or do you want?
Can you just hang on? We'll handle this one. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I just ask a question to the staff, please? I didn't realise we do anything like wetlands or something like that in the domain. Or do we have existings, or is it things we like to do? I didn't realise.
The intent is to use the existing waterways and enhance those with native planting, as well as some exotic planting in keeping with the botanical collection that the domain is. And in terms of that broader native element, the intent is to increase the amount of native planting within the domain, particularly in that wildlife garden area and along the promenade and potentially where the Parks Depot is currently.
But there's no new wetlands. No, okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in favour of exclusive native planting. I mean, we've got some magnificent exotic maples in the domain. I hope when they need replacing, we replace them with like for like, perhaps, because nothing can, it's all very well having all natives, but nothing can be boring if your whole domain becomes natives. A lot of them aren't spectacular like some of the exotic trees that we do get, and I hope we keep a mixture.
Okay. Wow, where does that leave us?
Yeah, this. Oh, sorry.
Hang on, Councillor Brown.
This is only a suggestion from the Forest and Bird Club, Society. Sorry, whatever. Yes. So basically, it's not something we have to do. It's just a suggestion. Is that correct?
I'd like a decision on it, though.
Yes, Forest and Bird is simply making a suggestion, but I think I heard Paul say that there was plans to use native planting around some of the waterways, but with a mixture of exotic to keep the nature of the current domain on track. So I think currently we're acknowledging Forest and Bird's submission and can say that there are some increased native planting, but it's not exclusive.
Okay, Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Chief Executive has summed it up pretty much what I wanted to say. I like the direction this plan is going, but there would be probably nothing more boring than the native plantings on the Canterbury Plains before man came here, particularly on the north side of the Ashburton River. It would just be tussocks and a bit of matagari and very little else, really.
Well, I got a history lesson once. Which man are you talking about?
Which what?
He's talking about the European, the Maori, or the Maoris.
Don't go.
Because you decide, Mr. Chair.
That's perfect. Because I got a history lesson once when I was on a marae.
Before the European settlers came here.
All right, okay. Councillor Rawlinson.
Pretty much what I was going to say has been said, but I stress it is important to keep the balance because the domain is known for what it is today, and yes, we need to do some planting with natives, but I do want to see the predominance of the way it is now, because we've got natives being planted all around the district, which is great to acknowledge them, but very important to keep the balance.
So what's in the plan stays. Happy, Tony? Yep, okay. Councillor McMillan, Flying Fox.
Thank you. would the question to staff, would the flying fox be included in some of the new playground equipment that's scheduled for the next year or so, or is that a whole different matter?
It probably needs a bit more thought. The intent is to include a new one, but the exact location of it needs to be thought through, I think.
Okay. Leave it as is.
I think it's an important feature, and I think we do need a flying fox.
But I thought he said there was a flying fox coming sometime.
Yes.
The plan currently shows one between the new access road and the existing path under the trees there.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
But whether that's the best place for it is probably up for discussion.
Okay.
Happy? Okay. Flying fox. Natural history and sculpture trails. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rawlinson.
That's all right. No, I was just going to say too, I think it's important that we put the Flying Fox well up the list, because people are always asking, when are we getting a new one? And I thought where you had it perhaps suggested to be placed was a good place, away from the main west, away from Walnut Avenue. And it was tended to be somewhere near where the new roadway would be, am I right? Mm. But it's just something I'd like to see up the priority list, not in the 10-year plan.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I agree with the previous speakers, and probably year two for direction of the plan.
Okay. Plaques at base of tree specimens could be enlightening and educational. You want to have a comment on that? Councillor Cameron?
Yeah, I support that. I think they're very useful, and it also talks a bit about the history and when they're planted and how old they could be, and so I support.
Okay, and commemorative plantings, Heritage Trail, Michael Hanneran. Okay, and we've got one there, Sculpture Trail is not important. So you've actually...
50.
I'm on 50. Under submit a name. I'm sorry, we're down to the bits and pieces now, that's the problem. The next topic up is lighting.
What is a sculpture trail?
Sculpture trail is there's some sculptures already there in parts of the domain. The one is to have many of them, I guess. Paul?
I think my understanding is there's a regular sculpture symposium, and as part of that, some of the sculptures are retained for use within the domain. So it might be a map or a app that people can use to find their way around the domain, to see the various sculpture and find out who created them.
Chief Executive?
Yeah, that symposium has in recent years been every second year, and we get a lot of interest in it, and the sculptures themselves are for sale, and many people come down and bid on some of those sculptures. If they're not sold, then they stay in the domain, remaining for sale, but they become part of the domain in a sort of a living way around that sculpture trail. And if the carvers come back in 2 years' time, then some new ones will be there, and they'll continue the trail and the for sale sort of aspect to that. A lot of interest in it. Last one was in, I would have said, autumn 2019, maybe 18 months ago, and a lot of people came to town and were very interested in those sculptures.
Okay, Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be very much in favour of putting plaques at the base of trees, explaining what species it is and a bit about it, if it's possible. I'm quite interested in trees, and sometimes I can't guess just what it is.
I think that's on the list now. Yes. Okay. What about the sculpture trail? Is that still on the list? Yes? No? Yes?
I was just going to make a comment. The person that organised that sculpture symposium no longer lives here, so it'll be up to others, I guess, to apply if they wish to have it, but I can see it perhaps being quite some time before there's another one. Or unless Hamish knows differently.
Okay, councillor Latham.
Regarding the sculptures, the first time that event was held, I was the auctioneer and it went very well. I'm not saying that because I was the auctioneer, but you may take that if you wish. The second year, it was okay. It didn't go quite as well. I couldn't be the auctioneer for the last one, and it was a real struggle because I think the novelty of it had died away, and the expectations of some of the sculptors as to the value of their pieces was a bit high. So, and just to have what's not sold left in the domain, I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do. If we actually like a sculpture and we buy it and place it in the appropriate position, I would be happy with that.
So, how would it be if we acknowledge the sculptures, but don't put a year on it? So it can happen in the future, but doesn't have to happen. Would that suit you?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Can I just add
Yes,
something?
Councillor
I
McMillan.
think last term when we first talked about this plan, we talked about a sculpture trail from the art gallery museum to the domain, and I'm wondering if that's what we mean, because I know it was reported in the paper, so I don't know if that's what it is or whether there's an actual sculpture trail in the gardens. Tony, you might remember.
Well, maybe if we leave the possibility that it can be picked up later on.
Yeah.
How would that be? Because if we take it out, that means it would have to be decided to actually put it back in again, whereas if we just leave it there, it just floats.
Yeah.
Can I suggest we do a little bit of research and make it, we'll leave it in because that's the consensus, but gives some clarity in the plan to what that intention is. We may have some notes there somewhere and we'll refresh ourselves. Apologies for not having that absolutely clear.
Okay, I'll move on to lighting. There seems to be a number of submissions in favour of better use of lighting, better lighting, and improvements. So I would see that more as we go along as a maintenance issue, and instead of just rushing in there and putting up a whole lot more lights. Is that a consensus, or Mr. Mayor?
Just think about the lighting. If the cable's already there for lighting, it makes it simple. But if there's no cables in for the electricity, then perhaps solar would be a better way to go.
Okay.
In wherever it needs to be.
Happy with that? Thank you. Now move to other projects in the draft plan. So, I think the first one, the cancer group, the Shade House, we have decided that very early on this morning, didn't we, that there was sort of a roof or a shade house as against a building. Am I correct? Ministry of Education. Educational opportunities. Do you want to leave that in or do you want to take it out? Councillor McMillan.
I think leave it in, and that could be kind of
Ongoing.
extended to the plaques on under the trees, and your wilderness garden and your birds, or all those sorts of signs and everything are all educational. I think.
Councillor Latham.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with Councillor McMillan. It's a vague sort of comment that they've made there, but I think we should just leave it in, and when we've got an opportunity to give some education to the public about what's going on and what is actually in the garden, then we should just take it. So just leave it in and go with the flow.
Okay, all happy? Signs, are you happy that we leave signs in to support educational, to encourage people to walk? That's a maintenance issue, or do you want some signs rushed in tomorrow? Quite happy just to leave it that there'll be signage in the plan. Signage in the plan, good.
Is that the signage for the but the Cancer Society, Mandy Casey talked about yesterday, smoke free, I mean.
No, we're coming to smoke free.
Okay, I'll wait.
Well, I intend that we discuss it. I don't know whether we can make a decision on it, but we'll see how we go. Placing a cricket all-round ground, a cricket ground near the playground is not family friendly. Well, we've got cricket grounds there. They're in the plan. Right. Okay. We move to other requests. I think I've got to handle this one by one, don't I, Tony? Yeah. Okay. Request for more music and outdoor films. So everyone wants to get out with their camera, do they? Or no? Yes.
No, they watch movies outdoors.
Well, if that's the case, I'm a no.
You know, like a big screen in the park, and you sit there and on your beanbag or on your picnic rug and watch a movie whilst you're having your dinner. We discussed this.
Okay. Who wants a big movie screen there? Hands up. Roger.
No, I'm not. No, Mr. Chairman, I'm not saying hands up. It says requests for more music and outdoor films included. Notes the observatory could be used for this. What's the observatory? Have we got an observatory?
I think she meant the
It's the band rotunda, isn't it?
Yeah, presumably the rotunda.
Which we decided
Well,
no to.
Yeah. So I think we'll acknowledge that we've received the anonymous person's suggestion and move on.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
I think that, I mean, it already has concerts and things already, and you want to encourage people to use the area, so...
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
No, we don't say anything, it's all done by this.
Okay. Happy, Tony? Yep. Encouragement, okay. Additional requests for car parks, notes, parking problem. I think we've acknowledged that and we'll slowly work to alleviate. Suggested gates at park entrance, that's done. Request for more toilets being built. Are there more toilets in the plan? No.
There's no additional toilet blocks, just an upgrade of the one in the...
So upgrade of present ones?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Vegetable garden and fruit trees. Yes, Councillor McMillan.
Oh, I got there first. I think that might tie in with the depot area.
Okay.
I'm assuming.
Okay, so we tie that in with the depot. Councillor Brown.
Can I shut up again?
All in agreement? Tie it in with the depot. Second, a sensory garden for people with disabilities, children and elderly. I thought there would be a move to make it friendly for disabilities, elderly and children. Am I correct? Anyone object to that? Sorry? Yep. Councillor Cameron?
A sensory garden is not just a normal garden that has easy access. It has special attributes that people can...
Right, okay.
Would you care to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, there are specific sort of design opportunities to create a sensory garden. It's not. I don't think the plan is saying that couldn't happen. I think the area for that Parks Depot area and the wildlife garden would be obvious candidates for that sort of design to be developed further.
So we leave that in. Okay, all in agreement. Thank you. Suggested Japanese-inspired garden using natives. Is that Japanese natives or New Zealand natives? An area for a farmer's market. Who's in favour? Councillor Cameron.
It was suggested that we could use the central hub, newly relocated, as a sort of an area for a market if need be. I have no opinion on a Japanese garden.
Could I just say, Mr. Chairman, this is Japanese inspired. So the idea of the serene, the contemplative garden, it wasn't necessarily to have a Japanese garden. It was the idea of that style of garden, but using natives. That's what I read.
Okay. Councillor Rawlinson.
And just regarding the farmers market, I was at their AGM last night, but they don't intend to move from where they are. They like that location on West Street because it's of the traffic.
Okay. But do we want a farmers market down there, Councillor Latham?
No, we don't, Mr Chairman.
Thank
We've
you.
already got a farmers
Thank you.
market.
Good. So, no to a farmers market in the domain. Over the page 52, nature-based playground. So
We are
doing that, happening, okay. Cancer, Ashburton Cancer Support Group, sports fields were smoke-free. I think they talked about vaping as well. I would be in favour of that. So, Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, I sort of assumed that the whole domain would have been smoke-free, so I think that that's something that we
Vaping free as well?
yeah, well, smoke and vape-free, yeah. I think is it possible?
Thank you. So this is under our smoke-free outdoor areas policy. So as you heard yesterday, which was confirmed, was that only applies to playgrounds and sports fields. So there is a part of the Ashburton domain that isn't covered within that. If you were wanting to go down that side of things, it's probably not really so integral to be a part of the domain development plan, but we could bring that policy, I could put that back onto the schedule to bring back to you earlier than when it's due for review next, if that's something you wanted to move on more quickly.
Are we in favour of that or not? Yes? Yes, we're in favour of that.
Okay, no problem. And just to clarify, so the smoke-free outdoor areas policy includes vaping. Council made that conscious decision last year.
Councillor Latham.
I would be in favour of the whole domain sports fields area being smoke-free.
Yep, we're working towards that, yep. Mr Mayor?
Also support that, but they requested that the signage be updated to the modern signage. The signage that's there is very old and outdated, and it's all changed. So I think that they say they would provide the signs even, just needed to put them up. So that needs to happen sort of as soon as we can.
So, Mr McCann, taking that on board?
Yes, through you, Mr Chairman, I recall that same conversation when we last reviewed the outdoor smoke-free policy. So perhaps there's a little gap in our communication with the Cancer Society about those signs, because that was raised at the point that some parts of the domain were smoke-free. So
Okay.
we'll re-energise that.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I guess it's an inspirational thing. What say we see somebody smoking, we're going to arrest them, or what's the protocol? To me, it's inspirational, isn't it? You hope people do it. There's no actual, we haven't got a policy or a bylaw that it's illegal.
No, so we don't have smoking wardens going around issuing fines if people are caught smoking in the wrong places. And as you say, it's an inspirational, aspirational type policy. It's about role modelling for our next generation and putting good steps in place to show what a healthy lifestyle would be.
And further to that, Mr Chairman, again, when we discussed the policy last year, we also talked about the self-policing nature of these sorts of policies. So you put the signs up, council shows the leadership by making the policy, and then you find often that some sectors of the community start reminding others of the smoke-free area, and there's a sort of a self-policing nature to some of these things.
Okay, we come down now to the bottom of page 52, skate park was suggested. Councillor Latham?
We have a skate park, we don't need another one, and particularly not in the domain.
Is everyone in agreement with that? Thank you. Disc golf course 4.
Sorry, could I just comment back on the skate park? I agree, the skate park, existing one, it does a good job, but that existing, I don't know what you call it, looks like a skateboard track thing that's there, the pump track, I wondered whether it could be expanded a little bit more, or just have some more hills and humps and make it a little bit more challenging, but it is a great place for young people to get on a skateboard and learn how to ride it or on their scooters. But I just wouldn't mind if we could put somewhere in the budget to look at enhancing it a little or make it a little more challenging.
Could add a note under the playground project that that could be looked at.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cameron,
I want to talk about the
disc golf.
disc golf.
Yeah.
I think with it, what is the cumulative annual growth rate of 30 to 40%, I think she said, which is a lot of people, and the domain is for the public and us to use. So I would support the installation of a disc golf course or field. I understand there can be some impact on trees, so I think we'd need, if that was going to go ahead and people wanted to do it, we'd have to make sure that we could minimise that as much as possible, and perhaps a smaller version of a course to start, and to see what the utilisation is and how it goes, and then perhaps expand it later. But that's just my opinion.
Paul.
Yes, I've been involved with a few disc golf courses over the years, particularly the one in the Queenstown Gardens, where I was the manager there for 13 years. They do, firstly, they're great for bringing people into the park. I would acknowledge that. They're a fantastic enabler to bring people into the park. However, they do cause a number of issues, particularly with damage to trees, and also with conflicts with pedestrians and other users of the park. So the course design is very important, and I think the course design proposed really takes the disc golf into the most formal part of the garden, which will have impacts on the annual beds and vegetation and other people as well. And then the actual tees themselves also, while they're paved, they tend to wear quite badly when they get used, so they become yet another thing that's very difficult to maintain in a formal garden. So I think you need to just think quite carefully about introducing this, and it's probably more of an issue, a policy issue for the management plan rather than development plan, I'd suggest. But it's certainly something to consider very carefully, and you may have other locations that you could enable this to happen in Ashburton.
Okay. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was very intrigued when this presentation was made, how enthusiastic they were about the quality of our domain. It would make an absolute fantastic disc golf course, and it just had everything that they wanted. But thinking about it, is it everything we want? And I would be reluctant to introduce that to our domain. And as has already been said, it attracts a lot more people, there's a lot more activity, and that in general terms is good. But I'm concerned that we may have damage to flower beds, trees, perhaps even an injury. I don't want to be too dramatic about these things. And I think if the Disc Golf Association want to start a club in Ashburton, there are probably adequate places for them other than our domain, so I would not be in favour of it.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative that they brought to us. The setup cost is very low. It's high numbers of people use it. Is the domain the right place? I'm not sure, but if it's not, then I think we need to find another location for them, because I think the sport is important to come to Ashburton. So if we could look for another location, it would be good.
Councillor Braham.
Same feeling here. I think the EA Centre might almost be a good option, because there's quite a bit of green outside that area if you go to the industrial park. That might be an option. I'd rather see them there than in the domain. I think there's too much conflict if it comes in the domain.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Agree with everything that's been said, and I could see this game taking off in this district like pickleball has down at the EA Network Centre. I think the idea is great, but we've got other treed areas, the Riverside area, or even the treed areas around Argyle Park. I was picturing that's another option. So, but in principle, yes, the idea is right, but maybe not in the domain.
Okay, so is the conclusion, principle, good idea, we've just got to find somewhere else for them. Does that sum it up?
Good idea, but not in our domain.
not in our domain.
And I think it's probably something that could be set up reasonably quickly. So if we could reply to the submitters saying that we do have another area that could possibly, I mean, that could get up and going in the next 6 months, or even before the summer. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Outdoor gym. Now, I saw some councillors on outdoor gym down there recently, so. So if that could be pushed, exercise trail, well, I think we've looked at that with the Promenade walkway, etc. Fencing, croquet club is done, is it? Almost. Removing old trees, painting of furniture, planting for the future, that's ongoing. Yes. Happy with that? No. Bringing back the information centre.
Great idea. Oh, there's no central.
So you want an information centre down there, councillors?
Mr. Chairman, we're interpreting that information centre as to be information about the domain. Yes. So it shouldn't be confused with what we've commonly recorded an information centre in terms of the overall District 1 on East Street. But the hub, which is now a little further north than the original proposal, is intended to contain information about the domain.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the information, I think it's probably an information board to show people where things are. And also with technology today, I think you have what they call QR codes, where you do with the phone and it comes up what everything is. And also saw in the plan somewhere about making some Wi-Fi available as well. So I think all those things link together to get what the submitter requires.
Got direction, Tony? Wooden signs are painted. So, well, that's ongoing maintenance. Request for wooden entry signs, corner of West Street and Walnut Avenue. Be updated. Maintenance. Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I'm on the next one, which is EV charging. If we're doing car parking, then we're updating and putting cables in. We probably should be putting EV charging stations in as well.
Okay.
And they wouldn't be free. They would be charged, pay for them. As EA do now with their ones. They charge you for them.
You happy with that? Okay. Outdoor barbecues for people to use. Request for additional. Sorry? Mr. Mayor.
Who maintains the ones that are there now, and what does it cost to maintain them, and are they vandalised, and gas or electric or gas? And I know the ones that require the gas bottles get stolen.
Through the chair, public barbecues are about $10,000 investment to install. They're maintained by the park staff at present. Probably weekly they service the fat base during the summer period. So there is an operational cost to keep them operating, but they're well used. Yeah, well, they can be electric or gas. So if electric is available, they'd be electric.
Okay, Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we be told how often they're used? Are they very popular, or are they worthy of the expense of installation and the maintenance?
Paul?
Through the chair, over the summer months, the ones near the access road are pretty popular. You see large families sort of collecting there, playing a bit of volleyball and using the barbecues. The one in the picnic area near the hospital, that is used when there's events on in that area, but other than that I don't think they get used much at that end.
Supplementary question, then, if we didn't have any, would it be too much of a detriment to the domain?
you suggesting what's there we take out? No? Yes?
Well, I suppose in a funny way, I am saying that. I mean, say if they're costly to install, they're costly to maintain, and they're not being used that much, if we just leave what's there and carry on, is that adequate? Or if we took them out so we didn't have that maintenance cost, would it be too much of a detriment to the domain? So I'm perhaps leave the ones that are there. I wouldn't put any more in.
Okay. Paul?
I'd just make a comment that I think park managers around the country have really observed that these barbecues get used far more than they ever did, and that's largely because of migrant families who love, gathering as a community around these facilities. So I think actually, putting a new facility in near your central hub, I think would be very well utilised.
Okay. You right there, Tony? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson.
If it has got the $2 slot to work the gas,
That's very true. I'm not sure if your ones are paid or not. Most people don't make them pay now because the cost of repairing the vandalism for people trying to break into them is more than you receive from the coins.
Okay. More picnic areas and gardens, less watering, suitable, sustainable options. We're I think we're kind of covering all that. Tennis courts should be incorporated. Okay. I'm anonymous 3 on page 54. A mural of Mid-Canterbury created on the public toilets. Grab you with enthusiasm. No? Councillor Rawlinson.
There's several ways of doing that. You can create a competition for it, and you remind me down in the Catlins, there's a set of toilets there, modern toilets, just like the ones you're putting in at Rakaia, and they've got this big mural of a sea lion on them, and that can enhance them. Whatever you choose to put on them, but it's something you're all laughing, I know, but when you go and see that, I can show you a photo of it, it actually looks really good. So it's something that I wouldn't cross off the list, but it's a way of, we're having a competition to paint the electricity boxes around town, the ones that are on the street, so it's something that, or telecom are, but it's something that you could look at thinking about.
Okay, how about we leave Councillor McMillan?
I was going to say the same. If it attracts people there and they take photos of it and it's a great way of getting people into the domain, then why not?
We allow it to happen sometime in the future? Happy with that? No? Yes?
Yes, I mean, there's no structural thing to do here. The toilet walls already exist, so at some point we can say that's a good idea and invite a process to put a mural on, but there's nothing to be done in terms of the development plan particularly.
Okay. Mr Mayor?
We've got an application or request out for now for some telecom boxes to have murals put on them, so we'll see what applications come in. If there's a lot of interest, then we may be able to get something out of that.
Okay.
We'll see how it works. But I was moving on to the next.
Cycleways, yes.
Was it cycleways?
Pigeons?
No, pigeons it was.
Pigeons, well, can we just go to cycleways first? I think they're being catered for, aren't they, with the new areas? Am I okay?
The existing cycleway remains within the domain.
That's right, yep. Pigeons, Mr Mayor. Pigeons.
Pigeons and cats is the next one. So do we have a management plan on what will happen to pigeons? I know there is some controlling that's done. Is the aim to eliminate, which it probably should be, and how do we achieve that? Because they're a nuisance all around town, so you've got to start somewhere.
Through the chair, it's an operational issue. We do regular culls. I'm not sure what the overall objective is, but certainly a matter that we could happily report back to the Community Services Committee on.
tidying them up's operational, but the goal of elimination is probably our role. If we give the directive to eliminate, then operationally you do it.
Well, yes,
Mr. Chief Executive.
I think in a perfect world that makes sense, Mr. Mayor. We do try and manage them, and Paul's quite right that we have periodic culls to maintain numbers, but a directive to eliminate, would need very careful thought as to how we would give effect to that. But certainly we do try and manage the issue currently.
Right, Councillor Rawlinson.
Playing with words, I would say a direction to dramatically reduce the numbers might work.
Okay. We want to reduce the numbers.
But I think that doesn't belong here. Pigeons aren't just an issue for a 30-year domain development plan. If the council wishes to consider and instruct us around pigeons, then I would have thought that was a bigger issue than just the domain. And so we'll make a note for some future policy work, Tony, around pigeons or pests in general, but not specifically the domain, I don't think.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, now we come to the timeline, and in some ways the events have overtaken, but it looks as if the people that were the most important who actually knew something about the lights going in, Mr. McCann, before anyone else did. So I'll work through it. The new entry and access way is still all happy that's most important, are you? I think you should be, but it's going to happen. Playground upgrades are important and ongoing. Would that be? Got that right? Central hub. We're not having the central hub as such, but a roofed something. What year do you want that? Sorry?
I think it needs to come in the next few years. It's not a long way off, it's just shorter. And I think we also talked about having an area for the coffee cart to come in, the Mr. Whippy, that sort of thing, that amongst it. So sooner rather than later.
Okay. Tony, long-term plan, is it? Yes.
I wonder with this if it would just be useful to give us an indication of a short-term project, a medium-term project, and a long-term project, and then we can go away and actually juggle the numbers. So short-term, think of that years 1 to 10, medium-term 11 to 20, longer-term years 21 to 30, perhaps.
Okay. Unfortunately, I've got to go to Councillor Latham first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most people who submitted on this, like us, weren't really sure what a central hub was, whether it was going to be a building with a cafe or whether it was going to be an area where there was information and people could gather at the start of their journey through the domain. So, yeah, I think they've probably got it about right, whatever they perceived it to be.
Councillor Rawlinson.
I see it as tying in with to naturally follow the new road in, which is going to fall out from the lights at Walnut Avenue to the new road, and then to me the natural thing then would be to develop the hub, and that general area is a priority.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Short term, I think new entry, playground upgrades, our new hub, and possibly bringing the water play up and there, and then the medium would be your Avery and your Parks Depot, etc., etc.
Avery's gone.
Pardon?
Avery's gone. Oh, you mean the new Avery?
Yes, I do mean the new Avery.
Okay. So is everyone happy with that scenario? General terms. Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I sort of thought the way it's set out there is irrelevant to me because everybody's put most important. Well, you can't have most important for everything. As Liz said, I'd pick 3 or something like that. Where do we pick our top 3 out of that rather than 12 or whatever it is? Because we've said no to the Avery, so that's crossed off, even though 12 actually mentioned it. but a lot of them will flow, but
Yep.
I'd say the top 3 or 4 and go from there.
Okay. Councillor Braham?
Yeah, we have to be careful a wee bit what we're doing. You know, the way that's looking there, 1, 2, 3, that's the most expensive one straight away to start off with. We've got a big building. I know we've been given 20 million as well, but I think we have to be careful how we place it through the LTP.
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, I think that's the issue here. I think broadly we can see what are the most important projects to the community. Other than the water one perhaps coming up, that we're not hearing of dramatic objections to the most important from councillors. But where they fit in terms of which year is absolutely an affordability and we've got to go away and do some work and suggest something to you, because we can't have everything as being more important than something else. There is a natural flow from the new access way into the area to do some work around that, and it will require resources and planning through the LTP. So unless there are objections to this sort of general pecking order, I think we need to go away and propose something to you.
Okay, so you're happy that we ask staff to propose a suggested timeline? Yeah. Okay, so that takes care of everything down to bottom of page 56. We've decided the Promenade to be brought forward at the top of 57. Well, that'll be decided in the suggested timeline, am I right? Traffic lights installed earlier if possible. Well, it's going to happen. Submitters.
All timeline stuff.
Yeah, all timeline stuff. So Councillor McMillan, yes?
It's another feedback, but I think Robin Kilworth made a really good point yesterday about reviewing the plan. She's put in here every 5 years. Sorry, I've skipped ahead. Onto the last page, right at the bottom, other feedback.
59, yep.
Yeah, but I think her point of having a review, and that might help with the timeline and etc., is a really good idea.
So do you want to review it every 3, 6, 9 or 10? Do you want it to fit the LTP, long-term plan? LTP? Councillor Braham?
Yeah, you normally do it in a 5 or 10 year circle, so we do 10 years with LTP, so it should be 10 years with it.
10 years? No. Mr Mayor?
I'd go for 5 years and keep it away from the LTP, because there's enough work to do in the LTP on its own without putting a review of this at the same time. So review it every 5 years. But what comes out of that review drops into the LTP.
So you're happy with every 5 years?
Yes.
Tony, 5 years?
Yep.
Yep. Every 5 years. I think the other feedback is almost self-explanatory from decisions already made.
Yep.
Right. I'm going to call on the Chief Executive or Tony just to say what happens next, but my understanding is that it's written up into language for the committee meeting, Community Services Committee meeting, which will then lead through to the council meeting after that, and the timeline is going to be discussed on what's possible in each financial year to date, and other stuff we will decide at the appropriate time in the timeline. Do you want to add to that, Mr. Chief?
No, just to refer to Tony in terms of the time frame on particularly the very immediate next step.
Thank you. I'll have to discuss with Paul and Bert in terms of their ability to turn everything around, but if we can, we'll get it to the next Community Services Committee meeting, and then it will flow to Council from there. If we can't, then it would go to the one following, but we'll work out, do our best to get it to the next Community Services Committee meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Can I thank the people of Ashburton for making submissions, and hope that they will see the reasons for our decision on each of the submissions or each of the things that they wanted in the plan for the domain for the future. I'd like to thank staff for the preparing and the preparation and the guidance and the suggestions on the way through. Thank you, Carol, for taking the notes. Thank you to Tony's team and the Chief Executive's team. Councillors, it's been a pleasure for me to chair you for such a forward-thinking, innovative plan. I wish you all the best in future decisions that will come from this plan, and I declare the hearing decision mode closed.